Chapter 2235. It looks like I can't hide anything from the Eighth Majesty. Yin Xiaoyan was very polite. She seemed extremely cautious before the Eighth Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, who possessed an extremely great status. Even though she was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire and possessed an extraordinary status, she still struggled to maintain her composure when facing her. The Azure Peng King still did not give up on investigating Mo Chang's murderer outside the Azure Poseidon Palace. He had always been an extremely protective person, and he was unruly. There was a wild brutality hidden in his bones. And Mo Chang, whom he had placed his hopes on, had been killed, which made him feel an urge to find the organization behind the murderer and settle the debt. However, a group of divine kings emerged from the Azure Poseidon Palace one after another. From them, the Azure Peng King finally learned that Mo Chang's murderer was a person called Ming Dong. Ming Dong's connection with the Heavenly Palace of Bishing was only exposed at the very end. The divine kings who emerged from the Azure Poseidon Palace had all left beforehand, so they had no idea that the 5 experts with Ming Dong were divine generals from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. As a result, the Azure Peng King knew nothing else apart from the name. Ming Dong, good, very good. I don't care who you are. I will never let you leave alive for killing my disciple. And the organization behind you, how dare they allow you to act so recklessly in the Azure Poseidon Palace? Once I investigate your background, I will definitely pay them a visit personally, the Azure Peng King said coldly. His icy killing intent seemed to cause space to freeze. Who knew whether he would still be bold enough to say such bold words after he learnt that Ming Dong was the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing? Shui Yunlan, Aladona, Ming Dong, Rui Di, and Ji remained seated near the 4 Grand Prime statues on the 12th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. They did their best to recover their vitality. However, at this moment, the simple and graceful sound of a zither suddenly rang out. The pleasant sound seemed to contain endless magic. It could pierce through metal and rock, breaking through all obstructions as it played in the surroundings with great clarity. There were several dozen god kings who were also recovering on the 12th floor. Many of them were protected by layers of formations, but the sound of the zither pierced through the formations effortlessly, rousing all the people in the region. In an instant, everyone who had gathered here opened their eyes and cast their gazes in the same direction. Shangguan Mu sat there in a violet dress with her eyes closed. The 36 strings of a zither of the demonic cry that lay across her knees actually began to beat by themselves, producing a wondrous sound. As the sound of the zither echoed out, it seemed to be projecting the ways of the world. It possessed a profound charm of the ways and possessed the ability to steal away people's souls. In just a few seconds, everyone, including Shui Yunlan, became intoxicated. They seemed to have been completely sucked away by the sound of the zither, unknowingly sinking into it. It was also at this moment that a simple inscription flickered on Ming Dong's forehead. Ming Dong immediately returned to his senses after his soul had been sucked away by the sound of the zither. "Sister-in-law," Ming Dong called out as he looked at Shangguan Mu in surprise. "Don't worry." Shangguan Mu slowly opened her eyes and said calmly. Afterwards, she gently pressed her slender fingers against the strings. Immediately, the pulsating strings stopped, and the soul-stirring sound came to an abrupt end. This is the 2 tunes of the demonic and divine inscribed on the zither of the demonic cry. I just want to see the power of the 2 tunes of the demonic and divine. "It won't harm anyone here," Shangguan Mu said. Undisguised joy filled her enchanting eyes. She had finally awakened the slumbering artifact spirit within the zither of the demonic cry. She had already gained the initial recognition of the zither of the demonic cry back in the lower world, so she had controlled it for many years already. Now that the artifact spirit had awakened, it naturally did not reject her at all. It treated her as the only successor of the 3rd ancestor, so it successfully accepted her as its master. Is this the legendary 2 tunes of the demonic and divine? It really is terrifying. My soul has actually been controlled unknowingly. Shui Yunlan returned to her senses. Her emotionless eyes were filled with sternness. Aladona also stared at the zither of the demonic cry in surprise. She said softly, "In the records of my god clan, when a third ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound personally performs the divine tunes, she can manifest the mysteries of the world and assist people in comprehending the ways of the world. Comprehending realms will be thousands of times easier than usual, and it has the ability to heal injuries to the soul. It's extremely wondrous. Once the demonic tunes are used, they can throw laws into chaos, overturn yin and yang, and control the souls of grand primes. The two tunes of the demonic and divine were the most terrifying techniques of the Taoist sect of divine sound in the past. I never thought you'd be able to control it now." Rui Di and Ji Yi also looked at Shangwan Mu'er in surprise. Due to the heritage of the sect of dragons and phoenixes, they did not know the legends of the third ancestor in as much detail as Shui, Yunlan, and Aladona. However, they were extremely shocked when they were momentarily lost. "Mu'er, has the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry awakened?" Jinshin also rushed over with lightning speed as he looked at Shangwan Mu. Enjoy. Yeah, there's still soul energy in this space that hasn't dispersed yet. After the artifact spirit absorbed enough soul energy, it has awakened." Shangwan Mu smiled faintly. She looked at the surroundings and said, "Only after the artifact spirit awakened did I learn that the soul energy here came from the ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia, who is only second to Grand Exalts. Although his soul has already been destroyed, perhaps due to the sealing of the Poseidon Palace or some other reason, a small portion of his soul energy still lingers in this space." Jianshan was surprised when he heard that. He immediately covered Shangwan Mu'er's mouth. Now that the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace had awakened, no one knew what would happen if he learnt that the zither of the demonic cry was absorbing the soul energy left behind by its old master. However, Jianshin had already communicated with the sword spirits secretly. He wanted them to learn how the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry had awakened and absorbed the soul energy here to recover. The zither of the demonic cry is special, which is why it can absorb the soul energy here. However, we can't. We even struggle to sense the existence of the soul energy here, the sword spirits said helplessly. Jianshin was filled with pity. If the sword spirits could recover some of their strength through the soul energy here, the assistance they would provide him in the future would be immeasurable. After a moment of hesitation, Jianshin looked at everyone and said, "The artifact spirit has broken free, and Xiaoman has successfully become the new master of the Poseidon Palace. I think we'll be leaving here very soon." "Jianshin, what do you plan on doing next?" Aladona asked. She did not care about the ownership of the Poseidon Palace. She had only come to carry out the war god's orders. "Jianshin, come with me. Come to the heavenly palace of Bishing with me. My 8th senior sister is outside, and my 1st senior sister has just shown herself. As long as you come with me, no matter how many people you've offended in the Poseidon Palace, I can guarantee you that they won't be able to do anything to you," said Mingdong. He also acted like he did not care about the Poseidon Palace at all. Shui Yunlan remained silent. She struggled to even protect herself right now. She did not even dare to leave through the entrance of the Poseidon Palace, so she was unable to help at all. Rui Di and Ji Yi said nothing as well. Although Jianshin came from their homeland, Jianshin had offended far too many people in the Poseidon Palace. Their sect of dragons and phoenixes did not possess much heritage, so they were unable to provide any assistance to Jianshin. "Mingdong, I have my own path to walk. I'll leave with Shui Yunlan through the teleportation formation in the Poseidon Palace." Jianshin turned down Mingdong's invitation. He had his own pride and dignity, so he did not want to live under someone else's roof. Moreover, he had the sword spirits with him, so he did not dare to go to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Chapter 2236. I'll continue cultivating in the Taoist sect of divine sound for a while. Although the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry has awakened, allowing me to complete the third ancestor's legacy. There are many notes left behind by the third ancestor in the Taoist sect of divine sound. They'll be of great help to me. Shangwan Mu looked at Jinshin. Her enchanting eyes were filled with worry as she said, "You've caused such a great disturbance in the Azure Poseidon Palace, and it's also because of you that many supreme divine kings have lost their chance at obtaining the Azure Poseidon Palace. There must be quite a few people outside who remember you. Your future path will definitely be very difficult, so you have to be careful." Jinshin smiled without minding at all. "Mu-er, don't worry. I won't die so easily. All right, here's a cosmic movement talisman. Keep it for when you need it. You have to take care of it." Jinshin took out a cosmic movement talisman from a space ring and passed it to Shangwan Mu-er. "It's actually a cosmic movement talisman. Where did you get it?" Aladona, Rue D, and Ji were all surprised when they heard about the cosmic movement talisman. This cosmic movement talisman is a god-tier talisman. It can bypass the obstruction of space and formations. It's said that once you possess a cosmic movement talisman, you can even escape from grand primes, Shui Yunlong explained. Shangwan Mu understood the value of the cosmic movement talisman from everyone's introduction. She could not help but feel extremely touched. She pushed the cosmic movement talisman back and said in concern, "Jinshin, you better keep this cosmic movement talisman. You need it more than me. I have more on me. You have to take this one no matter what. I'll be much more at ease with this talisman on you," Jinshin said firmly. He left no room for negotiation. "All right, I'll take this cosmic movement talisman for now. However, don't forget that we promised Xiao Bao that we would go back for him within 10,000 years. Shangwan Mu stared at Jinshin deeply. As soon as Xiao Bao was mentioned, Jinshin could not help but think of his child who was waiting for his return on the Tian Yuan continent, as well as Yu, Huang Yuan, and his other relatives and brothers. He missed them deeply. At this moment, Jinshin and the others suddenly felt their surroundings change. They had been taken away from the 12th floor by a mysterious force, appearing in a huge cave that seemed ancient. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to be alarmed, and they revealed vigilant expressions. "Don't be nervous. This is the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace," Jinshin said. "In the Tsang Poseidon Palace, only the artifact spirit of the Tsang Poseidon Palace had such great ability." "Brother Jinshin," Xiaoman's voice rang out from nearby. She and the artifact spirit of the Tsang Poseidon Palace silently appeared beside Jinshin. They looked at Jinshin excitedly. The artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace studied Ming Dong with his small eyes. He would glance at the 5 divine generals behind Ming Dong from time to time as the light in his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. "Xiao Man, you succeeded?" Jinshin looked at Xiao Man with a smile. Xiao Man nodded and said excitedly, "I've already grasped the most basic functions of the Tsang Poseidon Palace." "Brother Jinshin, do you know? I feel like I've fused with the Tsang Poseidon Palace. I can feel its changes at all times. It's a wondrous feeling. However, I heard from the artifact spirit that I still have a very long way to go before I can completely control the Tsang Poseidon Palace with my own strength." "All right, artifact spirit, hurry up and take out the legacies in the Tsang Poseidon Palace. That's my agreement with Brother Jinshin," Xiao Man said to the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit nodded. He had already learned about this from Xiao Man, so he immediately reached out. Immediately, all the formations and restrictions outside the primordial realm legacies in the Tsang Poseidon Palace shattered at the same time. The various legacies that had been stored there for several hundred years all vanished at the same time. When the vanished legacies reappeared, they all hovered before the artifact spirit in the Tsang Poseidon Palace. The artifact spirit was basically omnipotent within the Tsang Poseidon Palace. He could control the power of the Tsang Poseidon Palace as he wished. Unless he encountered existences that surpassed the Tsang Poseidon Palace, it was impossible for them to escape from his grasp. As a result, the various formations left behind by the chaotic primes and the weaker infinite primes were naturally useless before the artifact spirit. There are a total of 5 chaotic primes legacies and 18 infinite primes legacies. Since this is the young master's orders, "You can take them," said the artifact spirit. The weapon spirit said. He looked at the various inheritances floating in front of him and was filled with complicated emotions. Jianshun did not stand on ceremony. He stowed away all the legacies that would make anyone envious. The legacies all appeared in different forms. Some were passed on through space rings, some were passed on through statues, and some were condensed into a stream of consciousness, stored in multicolored beads. Without any exception, every single legacy came with a space ring. Rue D. Ji. According to our agreement, these belong to you. Jianshun gave 3 portions of the legacies to Rue D and Ji. This was the agreement between the two of them. Rue D and Ji were very tempted when they saw the Chaotic Prime's legacies and several Infinite Prime's legacies hover before them. However, they did not accept them immediately. Instead, they hesitated. In the end, Rue D and Ji only accepted 1 Infinite Prime's legacy each. They said, "Actually, we didn't do much. If we really did accept 3 portions, we wouldn't be worthy of it. As a result, Ji and I will just take 1 Infinite Prime's legacy each." If it weren't for the fact that our sect of dragons and phoenixes' heritage is so shallow, and we really do need these things to replenish ourselves, we definitely wouldn't have accepted any payment from you, said Ji. She was rather helpless. After accepting the items, Rue D and Ji bid farewell and left. Afterwards, Aladona left as well. She wanted to return to the God Clan as soon as possible and report what had happened in Poseidon's palace to the war god. "Brother, since you don't want to return to the heavenly palace of Bishing with me, I won't force you. I'll be going to the Cloud Plain next and have a look at your Tianyuan family. Do you have any messages for them?" Ming Dong said. Jianshun hesitated before giving all the legacies he had obtained in Poseidon's palace to Ming Dong. Then he took out a few god-tier heavenly resources from his space ring and said, "Take these things to the Tianyuan family and see if there's anyone suitable for these legacies." "All right, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I'll be staying in your clan for a while this time, so you don't have to worry about the safety of the Tianyuan family. With my identity as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, protecting a clan is no problem," Ming Dong said confidently. Ming Dong vowed solemnly. With his current status, he did have the right and confidence to do so. Chapter 2237. Even the artifact spirit was surprised when she heard Ming Dong's identity. She thought, "And I had thought he was a disciple of one of the 8 majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing. I never thought he would actually be the 9th majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. In the past, the heavenly palace of Bishing only had 8 majesties, and they were all direct disciples of the Eneta, Grand Exalt. In reality, only the direct disciples of the Eneta, Grand Exalt, have the right to be referred to as majesties in the heavenly palace of Bishing. Since this person claims to be the 9th majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, it means he's also one of the direct disciples of the Eneta, Grand Exalt." The artifact spirit glanced at Ming Dong deeply. She showed an extremely rare expression of caution. She turned to Xiao Man and said secretly, "Little master, this person called Ming Dong has an extraordinary identity. You have to befriend him during this rare opportunity. That's because his master is extremely impressive. There were 7 Grand Exalts in the Saints' world in the past. The Eneta Grand Exalt was an existence that ranked in the top 3. She was renowned, second only to the war god of the God Clan. But I don't know him," Xiao Man replied secretly. She had no idea what to do. Her message had been concealed by the artifact spirit, so even though she was weak, it was impossible for the Divine King to hear what she said. "Brother, take care. Don't forget that we still have to return to the Tianyuan continent and visit our homeland. I'll be waiting for your return." Ming Dong also bid farewell to Jianshun before leaving with the 5 divine generals. Afterwards, Shangwan Mu bid farewell to Jianshun reluctantly as well, leaving the Azure Poseidon Palace. The Azure Poseidon Palace had already accepted a master, and Jianshun was about to leave through the teleportation formation. As a result, there was no reason for them to remain any longer. They all bid farewell and left. In the blink of an eye, Everyone had left. Only Jianshan and Shui Yunlan remained. Looking at the lonely Jianshan standing there, Xiaoman couldn't help but ask, "Big brother Jianshan, are you going to leave too?" She was filled with reluctance. Jianshan heaved a long sigh of relief and restrained his slightly empty feelings. He turned around to look at Xiaoman and said, "Yes, I'm leaving as well. Xiaoman, please lend me the teleportation formation in Poseidon Palace. Brother Jianshan, you should stay in Poseidon Palace and cultivate." The artifact spirit said that there are many resources in Poseidon Palace. You will be very safe here. Furthermore, Sister Ziyun is also here. Xiaoman urged him to stay. Her voice was filled with pleading. She was still young and naive, so she still believed that Jianshan had feelings for Ziyun. Xiaoman's urging immediately displeased the artifact spirit of Poseidon Palace. Without asking for Xiaoman's permission, he controlled the power of Poseidon Palace to move Jianshan and Shui Yunlan to the teleportation formation. He said, "This is the teleportation formation, but you'll be teleported to a random location. The only thing that can be guaranteed is absolute safety. You should go." The artifact spirit of Poseidon Palace seemed to be afraid that Jianshan would stay. Jianshan smiled faintly. He ignored Xiaoman's pleading and stepped into the teleportation formation with Shui Yunlan, disappearing from Poseidon Palace. He did not ask about the Pernite ore that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had mentioned. First of all, the Pernite ore was terrifyingly hot. Even if he could last a few seconds in the lava, he might not be able to collect the Pernite ore again. Moreover, the artifact spirit of Poseidon Palace had awakened. It definitely knew the importance of the Pernite ore, so it definitely would not allow him to touch it. "Little master, you're far too naive. Fortunately, I held back and didn't give all the legacies to that little bastard, or we really would have suffered a huge loss. However, even if I only gave him a small portion of it, and it's all relatively weak legacies, that little bastard would have benefited from it." After Jianshan and Shui Yunlan left, the artifact spirit of Poseidon Palace immediately sniggered like a sly old fox. With a wave of his hand, over a dozen other legacies hovered in the air before him. Many primordial realm experts from various organizations waited anxiously outside Poseidon Palace. Many of their faces were filled with worry, while some of them paled. Is Zhu Wen's name still on the Divine King's throne? An illusionary old man descended on a huge spaceship in space. He spoke in a dignified manner. "Great Elder, young Master Zhu's name is still on the Divine King's throne. It hasn't vanished." A few middle-aged men replied politely before the illusionary old man. "That's good. Zhu Wen is the most outstanding disciple of our ancient Zhu clan in the past 1,000,000 years. He bears the mission of reviving the clan, so nothing can go wrong. Old man's clone will remain here. Old man wants to personally watch him emerge from the Azure Poseidon Palace alive." Is the young lady's name still on the Divine King's throne? On another spatial warship, a hoarse and old voice rang out for the umpteenth time. "Clan, the young lady's name is still on the Divine King's throne. I hope Rue D and G, ye can make it out safely." A similar voice rang out from a spaceship that resembled a dragon. The person that spoke was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He seemed to be amiable and approachable, yet he possessed a dignified aura that was dignified without being angry. He was called Rueda, and he was an elder of the sect of dragons and phoenixes. At the same time, he was one of the most powerful members of the sect of dragons and phoenixes, a chaotic prime. If we had known that the changes to the Poseidon Palace would be so severe, we would never have let Rue D and G enter no matter what. They're the clansmen with the greatest talent and potential in the past 1,000,000 years of our sect of dragons and phoenixes. They have extremely great hopes of becoming grand primes in the future, allowing our sect of dragons and phoenixes to truly become a peak organization. Similar scenes played out in many places. Clearly, the surviving Supreme Divine King in the Poseidon Palace had already attracted the attention of many large organizations. There were many people of great status among them, and some of them even carried the hopes of reviving their clans. However, at this moment, A powerful pulse of energy suddenly appeared at the entrance of the Poseidon Palace. Afterwards, a large group of people appeared out of nowhere. The strongest among them were only Divine King. Basically, all of them were pale and haggard. They seemed extremely weak. They were the last surviving Supreme Divine King in the Poseidon Palace. Most of them remained seated. Clearly, they were still recovering. They did not realize that they had already left the Poseidon Palace. Only when the coldness from outer space arrived did they snap back to their senses. When they opened their eyes, they were all stunned. What's going on? Why have I suddenly appeared outside? Many of the Supreme Divine King were confused. They had no idea what had happened. They're out. They're all out. At the same time, the dark, desolate region of outer space was thrown into an uproar. The many experts who had been waiting outside for quite some time all gathered. I never thought I'd be sent outside by the artifact spirit. It sure saves me some effort. To no surprise, Ming Dong was among the Divine King that had been sent out. He was currently hurrying towards the entrance of the first floor with the 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. But as soon as he reached the 9th floor, he was sent out by the power of the Poseidon Palace. Let's go find my 8th senior sister. I'm going to the cloud plane. I need to get my 8th senior sister to send me some powerful divine generals. Haha, it's been so many years. I wonder how the little tiger has grown now. And that proud snake, newbies too, Ming Dong joked. He was clearly in an extremely good mood. You're Ming Dong? The murderer of my disciple, Mo Chung? At this moment, an extremely strong killing intent swept over in an overwhelming manner, causing the starry sky to tremble. The void was torn apart, and countless stars were swaying. Chapter 22:38. Ming Dong looked over and saw that a middle-aged man in azure robes had silently appeared before him. He stared at him viciously. Ming Dong could sense a terrifying presence from the man in azure robes. Not only did he feel his limbs turn cold, but his entire body also turned cold. Even his body was immobilized by the terrifying presence. The 5 divine generals behind Ming Dong all gritted their teeth. They wanted to put on their hidden divine general armor, but under the green-robed man's presence, what should have been an extremely simple action became extremely difficult. Before the man in azure robes, they were truly as weak as ants. They did not even have the ability to flee. To no surprise, the middle-aged man in azure robes was the Azure Pung King. As the Azure Pung King stopped Ming Dong, figures constantly flickered in the surroundings. Primordial realm experts appeared like they had teleported, safely taking away the supreme divine king of their clans. They were afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Many of the primordial realm experts glanced at Ming Dong sympathetically before they left. In their eyes, Ming Dong's fate was obvious after offending the Azure Pung King. In a single moment, all the divine king who had made it out alive from the Azure Poseidon Palace were taken away. Only Ming Dong and the 5 divine generals remained. It was not that they did not want to leave, but they were immobilized by the Azure Pung King's presence. They could not leave even if they wanted to. Blood oozed from the corner of Ming Dong's mouth. He had yet to recover to his peak condition, so he immediately showed signs of being overwhelmed by such a powerful presence. His entire body ached like it was being ripped apart. Since my disciple, Mo Chung, died to your hands, you won't be able to escape death no matter where you come from, said the Azure Pung King coldly. The Azure Pung King said coldly. His most important disciple, Mo Chung, had died to Ming Dong's hands, so he naturally hated Ming Dong greatly. He did not want to take Ming Dong's life so easily. He had already made up his mind to torture him in the cruelest way possible. The Rock King is really angry. At this moment, a gentle and extremely pleasant voice rang out. The graceful 8th Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing strode over in a red dress. She did not seem to be in a hurry, but she crossed a huge distance with a single step, appearing before Ming Dong like she had teleported. With the arrival of the 8th Majesty, Ming Dong immediately sensed that the terrifying presence that was as vast as the ocean had vanished. This allowed him to let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he immediately felt like he was about to collapse. He almost lost his footing. You want to stick your nose into other people's business again? The Azure Pung King's face sank. He glared at the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing as his anger surged. Previously, when the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing wanted to take Yuan Xiaoyan away, he gave the eighth majesty face out of consideration for the first majesty. However, at this moment, the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing actually planned on interfering with the murderer of his disciple. This made his face sink. He's a member of our heavenly palace of Bishing. Does Senior Pung King want to become enemies with our heavenly palace of Bishing? Senior Pung King, please reconsider. The eighth majesty seemed at ease, but she secretly used a secret technique unique to the heavenly palace of Bishing to call out to someone in the distance. First Senior's sister. What? Ming Dong is actually a member of the heavenly palace of Bishing? No wonder he was even bold enough to kill the Azure Pung King's disciple. So he has the heavenly palace of Bishing behind him. The eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing has appeared. I wonder what the Azure Pung King will do now. The Azure Pung King is renowned for his viciousness. He's a very difficult person to talk to, and he possesses the Azure Pang's movement technique. His speed is unparalleled. He's not someone to be trifled with. Across the entire Saints world, there's barely anyone who dares to disrespect the Azure Pung King. In the distance, the primordial realm experts who originally did not care about Ming Dong began to pay attention to him as the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing appeared. They looked between the Azure Pung King and the eighth majesty with interest. On one side was a renowned figure of the Saints world, while on the other side was the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Both sides possessed great backgrounds. So many primordial realm experts were eager to see whether they would clash or not. He killed the disciple I was most proud of. The eighth majesty should understand my temperament. Does the eighth majesty really plan on protecting this person? The Azure Pung King was emotionless. His presence erupted like a flood, causing the stars to dim and the surrounding space to collapse. He stood in the spatial crack that constantly collapsed and healed as he stared at the eighth majesty coldly. He showed no intentions of backing off. He really is the Azure Pung King. He's so unruly that even the heavenly palace of Bishing can't deter him. Although the Azure Pung King's strength is nowhere close to invincible, his speed is unrivaled. Apart from the first majesty, no one else in the heavenly palace of Bishing can deter the Azure Pung King at all. Even if he can't defeat them, no one can stop him if he insists on leaving. Many primordial realm experts converse secretly. Many of them looked at the Azure Pung King with deep fear and fear. So you're Mo Cheng's master, the Azure Pung King. The Azure Poseidon Palace is a place filled with conflict. Your disciple can only blame himself for not being strong enough for dying to me. He can't blame anyone else. Say, you're a supreme expert, yet you've lowered yourself to seek out a junior like me for a useless disciple. Aren't you a little too shameless? Ming Dong glared at the Azure Pung King and called out. He showed no fear at all, nor did he show any respect as he spoke. How dare you? The Azure Pung King bellowed out. His face paled when he was publicly contradicted by an ant-like junior. Dazzling azure light suddenly erupted from his body, condensing into a huge wing. Like a blade, the wings slashed out with devastating might. Naturally, he used the wing condensed from azure light to deal with the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing who stood before Ming Dong. Under everyone's gazes, he naturally did not dare to harm the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. As a result, the power of the wings was only used to keep the eighth majesty busy. His method of dealing with Ming Dong came from a feather completely condensed from azure light on the wings. It seemed like a feather, but it also seemed like a scale. It tore through space as it shot towards Ming Dong with lightning speed. Azure Pung King, don't you dare. The eighth majesty bellowed out. Her voice was no longer gentle. It was filled with viciousness and killing intent. This was because she was powerless to stop the feather that shot towards Ming Dong. She could only watch helplessly as the feather shot towards Ming Dong at an unbelievable speed. However, at this moment, the space around Ming Dong suddenly twisted. The Azure Pung King's feather that shot towards Ming Dong came to a halt when it came in contact with the twisted space around Ming Dong. It had forcefully come to a halt. Afterwards, the distorted space suddenly cracked open, and a slender, white hand extended out, sending a palm strike towards the Azure Pung King gently. Immediately, space shook violently. The laws of the 3,000 ways were disrupted, falling into a mess. Chapter 22:39. Time seemed to come to a standstill at that moment. The entire universe seemed to fall silent. The hand that extended from the spatial crack became the only thing in the world, affecting everyone's minds. At that moment, all the primordial realm experts in the surroundings felt like their minds had been sucked in by the supreme might of the hand. All of them had been imprinted with the might of the hand. Whether it was infinite primes or chaotic primes, they were all affected. In the distance, the solitary sword ancestor, who sat on a meteor with a sword on his back, suddenly stood up. He stared at the hand sternly as all his hairs stood on end. So powerful. He really is one of the most powerful experts below Grand Exalt. He really is terrifying, the solitary sword ancestor thought. Even with his strength, he felt powerless before the hand. Even the solitary sword ancestor, who was a bystander, felt so deeply. So the Azure Pung King, who directly faced the palm strike, was even more shocked. Faced with a lightning-like palm strike, he felt like he was facing the sky, vast and unreachable. He felt so insignificant and powerless before it, where he could not even think about resisting. The presence of laws in the hand was just too powerful. It directly affected the Azure Pung King's mind, making him feel like he had no choice but to die if the heavens wanted him dead. However, the Azure Pung King was a renowned peak expert in the Saints' world after all. Azure light erupted from his eyes as he suppressed his shock. With a great roar, a terrifying pulse of energy immediately surged out, turning into a torrent that struck out with the supreme power of laws. Immediately, the region of space was obliterated. The Azure Pung King's strike was just too powerful. He had struck out with his full strength without holding back at all. It was so terrifying that it could not even be described as devastating. As far as the eye could see, the space in a range of several dozen million kilometers collapsed from the Azure Pung King's strike, reduced to eternal darkness. Many primordial realm experts and divine king realm cultivators failed to flee in time, so they were all sucked into the cracks. Since you want to touch me, you have to accept the consequences. If these people die, it'll all be because of you. The Azure Pung King roared inside as madness burned in his eyes. He did not do that on purpose. It was just that his opponent was too strong. He had to use his full strength to attack. He was simply unable to restrain his energy and prevent it from spreading out in the slightest. That was why the surrounding space was shattered by the energy he released. Opposite the Azure Pung King, the slender hand that extended out from the spatial crack was not affected by the Azure Pung King's stream of energy at all. The seemingly weak hand possessed a mysterious, supreme power. Wherever the hand passed by, the Azure Pung King's stream of energy would disperse to the sides. In that split second, her slender hand landed on the Azure Pung King's chest with unstoppable force. Spurt! The Azure Pung King immediately paled. Blood sprayed from his mouth as his entire chest exploded, creating a huge, transparent hole. Azure scales scattered in all directions, spraying into space with the Azure Pung King's blood. The Azure Pung King staggered backwards. He stared at the hand that had emerged from the spatial crack in fear. His eyes were filled with fear as well as fury. Afterwards, without any hesitation, he turned around and fled. He pushed his speed to the limit, crossing millions of kilometers in a single instance. He fled to the depths of space with unbelievable speed. Azure Pung King, the people of my heavenly palace of Bishing are not people you can touch. I'll teach you a lesson this time. There won't be a second time. An icy cold voice boomed out from space. The voice crossed through time and space, directly catching up to the Azure Pung King who had already vanished. It rang out clearly in the Azure Pung King's ears. The mysterious master who had acted in secret did not pursue them. Instead, her palm that seemed to have traveled through time and space suddenly bloomed with a dazzling light. This light was like a thread that penetrated deep into the crack and pulled back many of the cultivators who had been sucked into the crack, but did not have enough strength to break free. In the end, the hand gently swiped at the space there. With this wave of his hand, the rate at which the universe was in the midst of shattering rapidly increased. In just a few short breaths of time, it was completely restored to its original state. Very soon, the space calmed down. The hand that had extended over had vanished silently at some point in time, leaving behind only Ming Dong and the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, who stood there unscathed. Even though they were the people closest to the Azure Pung King and were in the center of the storm of energy, they surprisingly did not suffer any injuries. As for the primordial realm experts and god kings in the surroundings, they were scattered in the surroundings in horrible shape. As soon as they thought about what had just happened, all of them felt lingering fear. They were filled with fear. The solitary sword ancestor remained on the meteor. When the Azure Pung King struck out earlier, the terrifying shockwaves of energy had reduced all the meteors in the surroundings to dust. Only the meteor beneath the solitary sword ancestor remained unscathed. It had not moved at all. At this moment, the solitary sword ancestor looked at Ming Dong with his old eyes. He secretly wondered about the identity of this young man called Ming Dong. We probably can't befriend this Ming Dong. Rui Di and Ji Yi looked at Ming Dong with mixed feelings in the distance, as they were in horrible shapes as well. The first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing only left the Azure Poseidon Palace recently. With her speed, she would be extremely far away in outer space already. Now, she's actually ripped open space because of Ming Dong and struck out from such a great distance away. It looks like Ming Dong's status in the heavenly palace of Bishing is quite high. If he's not the eighth majesty's disciple, he's the first majesty's disciple. Remember, you can't provoke this person. Elder Rui de the sect of dragons and phoenixes appeared out of nowhere beside Rui Di and Ji Yi. I never thought you would actually come from the heavenly palace of Bishing. To another side, the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire, Yun Xiaoyan, stood in outer space as her emotions became extremely mixed. Although I knew you came from an extraordinary background, I never thought you'd come from an unreachable place like the heavenly palace of Bishing. The difference between our statuses is actually so great. Yun Xiaoyan was gloomy as she felt dejected. Chapter 2240. The vast outer space was filled with an endless presence of darkness and coldness. There was no time or direction, so it was very easy for people to get lost. At this moment, a small spaceship flew through the deathly silent outer space like a ghost. It moved extremely quickly. A resolute young man who seemed to be in his 20s stood at the controls of the spaceship with a woman who was around his age. They stared at the vast expanse of outer space. Jinshin, where are we going next? At this moment, the woman asked. She stared at the seemingly foreign, yet familiar, endless outer space in a daze. Her face was filled with confusion about the future. We don't have a star map on us, so we don't know where we are right now. Our priority is to figure out where we are right now and then make plans. After all, this vast expanse of outer space isn't as peaceful as it seems on the surface. Aside from guarding against the space beasts that live here, we need to pay attention to a few inaccessible, dangerous regions, said the man as he stared at the outside world without blinking at all. The two of them were Jinshin and Kea. After Jinshin and Shui Yunlan emerged from the teleportation formation in the Poseidon Palace, they arrived in this foreign space. Shui Yunlan did not stay with Jinshin. She turned down Jinshin's suggestion to see Chanyang Mingwei and left by herself. Afterwards, Jinshan called Kea out of the Inata Tower. He found a small spaceship in the space ring of a supreme divine king in the Poseidon Palace. So he and Kea traveled through outer space on the spaceship. The only problem was that he did find two small spaceships after searching through all the space rings on him, but he did not find any star maps at all. As a result, Jianshun lost his way in the vast outer space. He could only control the spaceship and travel in a straight line, hoping to come across someone who was traveling through outer space and ask for directions. It's just a pity that Chanlong has gone missing. Kaya sighed gently. She thought about the days when she, Jianshun, and Chanlong had traveled through outer space. She was filled with pity. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Don't forget that the Neptunian mountains have disappeared with him, said Jianshun. However, at this moment, Jianshun and Kaya's faces changed slightly. The stars that originally filled the sky had all vanished, reducing the space they saw to true emptiness. There was only eternal darkness without any starlight. Is this a formation? Jianshun studied the surroundings and said sternly. It went without saying that a formation that could be cast down in outer space would be extraordinarily powerful. However, he did not have any mastery over the way of formations. Once he became trapped, he would be in trouble. With a flash, Jianshun and Kaya arrived on the deck of the spaceship. The two of them stared at the surroundings sternly. We have indeed become trapped in a formation. It's just that the formation is extremely large and profound. It's a pity that Chanlong isn't here, or he might have been able to find a way out with his mastery over the way of formations, said Kaya in a deep voice. Neither she nor Jianshun were skilled with the way of formations, so the current situation was extremely bad for them. Come with me. Let's see if there's a way out. Jianshun grabbed Kaya's hand and began retreating in the direction they had come from. However, once they became trapped in a formation, it was impossible to leave just like that. Moreover, the two of them did not have any mastery over the way of formations. As a result, in just a while, Jianshun felt like he had completely lost his sense of direction. He had truly become lost. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy appeared. Finger-sized streaks of black light suddenly appeared. They were as dense as rain as they engulfed Jianshun and Kaya with terrifying killing intent. The streaks of black light came from all directions, sealing off all paths of retreat for Jianshun and Kaya. The might that each streak of black light gave off made Jianshun shiver. With so many streaks of black light gathered together, the terrifying might they possessed was enough to slay primordial realm experts. Get in the tower, Jianshun called out and took out the Inata tower as quickly as he could. With a flash, he and Kaya had entered the tower. Boom, 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 boom. The streaks of black light struck the damaged Inata tower and immediately produced a series of deafening booms. They caused the Inata tower to shake and tremble. Under the devastating ripples of energy, the spaceship parked nearby that had not been withdrawn in time was immediately reduced to pieces. Jianshun did not hesitate at all within the Inata tower. He immediately charged out with the Inata tower, hoping that he could use its power to charge out of the formation. I wonder if the person who cast down this formation is here. If he is, I need to leave immediately, or I'll be in big trouble. I only have one left of the 3 cosmic movement talismans I obtained from the Poseidon Palace. I can't waste it here, Jianshun thought as he controlled the Inata tower to fly away at full speed. The Inata tower endured the most ferocious attacks from the formation as it rampaged its way through. Even though it was still damaged and could not unleash its true power due to the seal of the sword Qi, it was still a god artifact of the highest level after all. Just the material it was made from was indestructible. As a result, even though the attacks from the formation were extremely ferocious, they were unable to do anything to the Inata tower. Boom! At this moment, a great sound rang out. The Inata tower had smashed through a spatial barrier, shattering a meteor hidden within. As the meteor shattered, a crack seemed to appear in the formation as well. Stop! You can't destroy the formation. At this moment, a hoarse, old voice boomed out like thunder. In the next moment, a huge hand, completely condensed from energy, extended out from nowhere with surging might. It grabbed the Inata tower and pulled it over. Jianshun's expression changed drastically within the Inata tower. He was unable to break free from the huge hand at all. After all, his control over the Inata Tower was still very weak. He was unable to unleash its full power. Jinshin's expression became extremely ugly as he sighed about his misfortune inside. He had already realized that he had probably encountered a primordial realm expert, and a very powerful one at that. Boom! The huge hand directly threw the Inata Tower at a meteor hidden by the formation. With a heavy thud, a huge crater appeared in the tough meteor due to the terrifying weight of the Inata Tower. Chapter 2241. Jinshin, don't go out. It's safer here. Once we go out, we won't even be able to escape with our current strength. Kea grabbed Jinshin's arm on the first floor of the Inata Tower and said worriedly. Jinshin stared at Kea in surprise when he heard that. He asked, "You can hear what's going on outside?" Although the inside and outside of the tower were only separated by a single door, they were actually two different spaces. He could hear the sounds outside the tower, and sense the disturbances outside, because he had refined a portion of the tower. However, how did Kea know what was going on outside the Inata Tower? Jinshin was extremely perplexed. Yeah, I've discovered that as my strength increases, I can vaguely sense what's going on outside, said Kea. In reality, she found it to be extremely difficult as well. This was because she discovered that as her strength rapidly increased, not only could she sense what was going on outside the Inata Tower, but she also felt more and more familiar with the Inata Tower. As a matter of fact, she even felt like she had fused with the space in the Inata Tower from time to time. Jinshin found what Kea had said to be unbelievable. If it were a saint artifact of low quality, it would indeed be very difficult to cut off Kea's senses from the Divine King's domain. However, the Inata Tower was not a saint artifact of low quality. It was a god artifact of the highest quality. Even though it was very damaged, it was impossible for Kea to sense the outside world without refining the Inata Tower with her current level of cultivation. Jinshin was perplexed by this matter as well. However, it was clearly not the time to think about that right now. He said, Kea, don't worry. I'll be fine. If I really come across danger, I'll use a cosmic movement talisman to flee. With that, Jinshin took out the final cosmic movement talisman from his space ring. He clutched it firmly and left the Inata Tower. As soon as he left the Inata Tower, Jinshin saw an old woman in plain clothes with messy hair that basically covered her entire face. She stood nearby with her hand by her side. The old woman did not look at Jinshin. She stared at the damaged Inata Tower as her expression became extremely mixed. Senior, it's actually you? Upon seeing this old woman, Jinshin's expression froze, revealing a surprised expression. He recognized the old woman with a single glance. She seemed like an ordinary person with her presence concealed. She was the person who had exchanged for the damaged god artifact from him on the spatial battleship. You didn't die? The old woman glanced at Jinshin indifferently. Even though she had only met Jinshin once, her impression of Jinshin was extremely deep because of the damaged god artifact. The old woman looked at the Inata Tower again and said, "But since you possess this item, it'll be difficult for you to die even if you want to. Can you tell me where you obtained this item?" Jinshin knew that the old woman had probably recognized the Inata Tower, but he was not worried at all. He gripped the cosmic movement talisman tightly as he became extremely vigilant. He said, "I came across this tower by chance in a dangerous place in a lower world. A lower world, a lower world. This tower has actually ended up in a lower world," the old woman murmured. The old woman muttered in a low voice. Her gaze was absent-minded, and she seemed to have lost her mind. After a moment of silence, she continued, "Was this pagoda found in the same place as the divine armor you gave me back then? I only found it in the same world. In reality, the tower and the god artifact were in different locations," said Jinshin. Sigh. The old woman sighed gently when she heard that. Her face was filled with bitterness. She said, "Looks like they're telling the truth. If that's really the case, being hunted down for several million years is not unjust. It's not unjust at all. Senior, you were hunted down for several million years?" Jinshin asked in astonishment. The old woman said nothing. She only stood there and stared at the Inata Tower quietly. She looked at the powerful slashes that covered it with mixed feelings. Senior, it's bad. It's bad. A crack has appeared in the natural concealment formation. At this moment, a young man in his 30s arrived before the old woman in a panic. He would raise his head from time to time as his voice was filled with uncontainable fear and unease. I know, the old woman said indifferently. She also raised her head to look at the sky as her eyes became gloomy. If the natural concealment formation had shattered due to some other reason, then so be it. But it just so happens that it was destroyed by the tower. This is the will of the heavens. Even the heavens don't want me to hide here so comfortably. The old woman's voice was filled with endless bitterness. What should I do? What should I do? I haven't condensed the soul tree yet. Without this natural concealment formation, I'm afraid I won't be able to escape from that devil's clutches. The young man was anxious and uneasy, and there was unconcealable fear on his face. Suddenly, the young man stared at Jianshun in resentment. He bellowed out, "It's all because of you. Why did you destroy the formation? Why did you come here? You bastard, I'll never spare you." With that, a dazzling, milky white light immediately rose up from the young man. It turned into a pillar of energy that shot towards Jianshun with a scorching presence. The pillar of energy moved extremely quickly and was extremely dazzling. Like a streak of light, it arrived before Jianshun in a single instance. Radiant Saint Force. Jianshun's eyes suddenly narrowed as he became shocked. He was a Radiant Saint Master in the first place, so he was extremely familiar with Radiant Saint Force. He could tell with a single glance that the white light was condensed from Radiant Saint Force. However, from what he knew, Radiant Saint Force was mainly used for healing. Its offensive abilities were extremely weak. Radiant Saint Masters were not the opponents of fighters at the same level of cultivation. However, the pillar of white light condensed from Radiant Saint Force clearly gave Jianshun an extremely dangerous feeling. It was so powerful that it had completely surpassed the level of the Divine King, making Jianshun feel threatened to a certain extent. Is this another way to use Radiant Saint Force? Jianshun was extremely excited. When he was in the lower world, he had heard from Fairy Haoyue that the Radiant Saint Masters of the Saints' world were extremely powerful. He had been looking forward to this for a very long time. He hoped that his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master could increase even further in the Saints' world. Chapter 2242. Jianshun's heart thumped. He was unable to contain his excitement. He did not choose to dodge the Divine King's attack, nor did he choose to counterattack. Instead, he filled his hand with chaotic force before extending it. He used his hand to receive the white pillar of light. He actually wanted to forcefully endure the Radiant Saint Force that was equivalent to a strike from a supreme God King with his fleshly body. In that critical moment, the white pillar of light struck Jianshun's hand with powerful pulses of energy. It immediately produced a heavy boom. Jianshun's body trembled violently. He took a step back uncontrollably. His hand had become bloody as intense pain flooded his heart. This power, it's so powerful. But on the surface, it seems to be another way of using Radiant Saint Force. But in reality, it's a power completely different from Radiant Saint Force. It's a different kind of law. Jianshun did not care about his injuries at all. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to comprehend the power seriously. The reason why he had used his hand to endure the attack was because he wanted to come in contact with the power in the most direct way possible. He wanted to use this method to see the power more clearly and understand its characteristics. Jianshun was unable to grasp the power immediately after coming in contact with it, but he had gained a certain understanding of it. He could see the direction he could advance Indiana. However, this law is rather special. It's not an exaggeration to call it an upgraded version of Radiant Saint Force, because I need to become a Radiant Saint Master if I want to comprehend this power, Jianshun thought. He was overjoyed by this discovery. He was rather tempted to comprehend the law. This was because it had been a very long time since his Radiant Saint Force had increased. It remained a Class 9. Class 9, Radiant Saint Masters would definitely be peak experts on the Tianyuan continent, but they were completely useless in the Saints' world. Even with its powerful healing abilities, it was of no help to Jianshan, who had reached the level of the Divine King. Because the energy level was too low, it was not that Jianshan did not want to increase his cultivation as a Radiant Saint Master, but he did not have the cultivation method to do so. The Divine King of Light was dumbstruck when he saw Jianshan block his attack with just his palm. He couldn't help but exclaim, "What a powerful body!" But soon after, his eyes became sharp again. He wanted to continue attacking Jianshan. Clearly, he did not want to let Jianshan go so easily. Sigh. The old woman sighed softly and said, "All right, the destruction of the formation has nothing to do with him. This is the will of the heavens. The heavens don't want me to live such a peaceful life. Speaking of which, this old one has dragged you into this. If this old one hadn't hidden here, perhaps they wouldn't have coincidentally passed by this place and then coincidentally destroyed this natural concealment formation." The old woman looked at the damaged Anata Tower. She did not treat all of this as a coincidence. Instead, she treated it as a predestined arrangement. "Senior, I don't know what you're talking about." The Divine King of Light clearly obeyed the old woman. He immediately stopped attacking Jianshan and stared at the old woman in confusion. Jianshan also stared at the old woman in doubt. The old woman was always staring at the Anata Tower, and she seemed to be in awe. Did she not only recognize the Anata Tower, but she also had a story that no one knew about with the Anata Tower? "Senior, do you know the master of the tower?" Jianshan clasped his fist and asked carefully. The old woman's expression became extremely mixed when she heard that. She sighed emotionally. "Speaking of which, the master of the tower is my grandmaster. It's just that I've never seen this great grandmaster before." "What? The master of the tower is Senior's grandmaster?" Jianshan was surprised. Disbelief filled his face. He had never thought that the old woman before him was actually the grand disciple of the Anata Grand Prime. The old woman stared at Jianshan deeply and said, "Looking at your great reaction, you must know the origins of the tower long ago." Jianshan nodded and did not deny it. He said, "Since Senior is the grand disciple of the master of the tower, may I ask if Senior wants to take the tower back?" Jianshan gripped the cosmic movement talisman tightly. He only said that to test the old woman. He had already made up his mind to immediately flee with the Anata Tower as soon as something went wrong. The origins of this tower are just too great. It's not something that an outsider can touch. Once I set my sights on the tower, I probably won't be able to escape death even if I flee to the ends of the world. The old woman was gloomy. She was filled with indescribable sorrow. "In name, I'm his grand disciple. That's an extremely illustrious and glorious status in the saints' world. There's barely anyone who dares to offend me in the vast saints' world. But in reality, I've been hunted down for several million years. I'm still on a run even now. Do you know the origins of the people who hunted me down?" The old woman said gloomily. As soon as she thought about the days she had spent as a fugitive, her heart was filled with indescribable bitterness. "Are they people from the heavenly palace of Bishan?" Jianshan asked. He could vaguely guess the reason. The old woman was probably Taji's disciple. "That's right. The people who hunted me down for several million years were divine generals from the heavenly palace of Bishan. The reason why they hunted me down was because my master, Taji, betrayed Grandmaster. They said my master colluded with outsiders and wanted to harm Grandmaster. As for me, because I was implicated by my master, I became the target of their pursuit. Originally, I refused to believe that it was true. At the same time, I refused to believe that my master would betray Grandmaster. After all, Grandmaster is a renowned sovereign of the Saints' world. He's one of the most powerful people in the world. With the entire Saints' world in perspective, just who would dare to plot against him? Only when I learned from you that my master's god artifact and Grandmaster's famed treasure had fallen into the same world did I have to believe it, the old woman said slowly. But fortunately, the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishan did not agree on the matter of hunting me down. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to survive until now. Only Jianshan could hear what the old woman said. The divine king beside the old woman could only see her lips move. He could not hear anything at all. Chapter 2243. With that, Jianshan understood that the natural concealment formation he had stumbled into was probably an extremely powerful one. Not only could the old woman avoid the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing by staying in the formation, but could also prevent experts from peeking into her whereabouts, as well as various searching techniques. It was extremely likely that the meteor he had accidentally smashed into with the Inata Tower was an important part of the concealment formation. Now that the meteor had been destroyed, the natural concealment formation was no longer perfect. A crack had appeared, so the old woman could no longer use the formation to avoid the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. As for the divine king of radiance, he had probably hidden here to avoid some kind of pursuit. Senior, we only stumbled into the formation by accident. As for destroying the formation, it was completely unintentional. It was purely a coincidence, so I hope Senior can forgive us for the trouble we've caused, Jianshan said apologetically after learning the entire story. This is the will of the heavens. It's not your fault, the old woman said weakly. The old woman waved her hand and spoke somewhat powerlessly. Immediately, her eyes, which were filled with the vicissitudes of life, looked at the overcast sky above her head. Her eyes revealed a deep tiredness. You can still find me even when I'm hiding here. The will of the heavens can't be defied. The will of the heavens can't be defied. Since the heavens want me to suffer and the heavens want me to pay for my master's sins with my life, I'll just hand over my worthless life to you. I'm tired of this life of hiding all day long. The old woman's voice was filled with deep powerlessness as a faint presence of death revolved around her. What joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? Ha ha! The old woman suddenly laughed aloud. At that moment, she had truly stopped caring about her own life. Senior, don't be so pessimistic. Didn't you say that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing had different opinions about hunting you down? Since that's the case, I don't think there's no way to fix this, Jianshan said. Fix this? How? If it could be fixed, why would I have been hunted down for so many years? I was even heavily injured and on the brink of death many times. Even my cultivation dropped from chaotic prime to infinite prime because I was too heavily injured. The old woman spoke with a desolate tone. Then, as if she had lost all her strength, she left with light footsteps. Looking at the old woman's lonely and frail figure, Jianshan was silent for a while. It's all because of you. Now, not only was Senior Su harmed by you, but I was also harmed by you. After the old woman left, the light divine king sat down on the ground, stared at Jianshan, and sighed. He did not continue to attack Jianshan. From the previous attack, he had already seen that he was not a match for Jianshan. My name is Jianshan. How may I address you, my friend? Jianshan stowed the Inata Tower away and made his way out of the huge crater. He clasped his fist at the divine king. Who's your friend? The divine king snorted coldly. He resented Jianshan, so he turned around and left without saying anything more. Xianming, if you want to avoid the person you speak of, you can hide in that tower. As long as you enter the tower, all of your presence will vanish from the world, and no divination methods or secret techniques will be able to detect your existence. At this moment, the old woman's voice rang out from afar. The radiant God King's body stiffened when he heard that. His gloomy face immediately brightened up as he ravished with joy. The old woman's words made him feel like he had seen a ray of light in the darkness. He was filled with hope once again. He suddenly turned around and said to Jianshan eagerly, See, can you let me stay in the tower for a while? Once I become a divine king of light and condense a soul tree, I'll leave immediately. At this point, he paused for a moment before he continued. If you are willing to help me, I, Xianming, will owe you a debt of gratitude. If you need my help today, I will do my best to help you. Even if I'm weak, I still have my father. My father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Undisguised pride appeared on Xianming's face as soon as he mentioned his father. Jianshan stared at the divine king of light in surprise. He had never thought that the divine king of light would have such a great background. His father was actually one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Although he had no idea what level of organization the Radiant Saint Hall was, it was not difficult to tell how powerful the Radiant Saint Hall was since the Divine King of Light was proud of it. It's not impossible for you to seek refuge in my tower, but I need to know who you've offended, Jianshun said calmly. He had no idea how he was going to learn about Radiant Saint Masters from Xianming, but now Xianming had actually taken the initiative to approach him. This was exactly what he wanted. Xianming immediately became overjoyed when he saw Jianshun agree. However, when he heard what Jianshun said at the end, he immediately became innocent again. He said, I haven't offended anyone. I haven't provoked anyone. It's just that an extremely terrifying great demon has set his eyes on us, the Divine King of Light. The great demon? Jianshun was doubtful. That's right, the great demon. The great demon suddenly appeared several 100,000 years ago. He's extraordinarily powerful, and he specifically hunts down the Divine King of Light everywhere. No matter how safe the Divine King of Light hides, they're unable to escape from him in the end. Who knows how many radiant Divine Kings have died to his hands in the past few years. Even I was forced to leave the Radiant Saint Hall in order to avoid the great demon. I planned on hiding in a remote region on the edge of the Saint's world. But it just so happened that when I passed by this starry sky, I accidentally stumbled into this natural concealment formation. When I sensed how powerful this concealment formation was, I simply opened up a cave abode here and used it as my cultivation ground in order to condense a God's soul tree here. I was the first person to come here. I've already stayed here for several 100,000 years. As for Senior Sue, she only found this place a few years ago. Originally, this was the best place for me and Senior Sue to hide, because this concealment formation was created by the heavens and the earth, and it's capable of concealing the workings of the heavens and rendering all deduction methods and secret techniques useless. In the end, your arrival destroyed this formation. Jianshun laughed dryly and changed the topic. What level of organization is your Radiant Saint Hall in the Saint's world? Your father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Can't he protect you? Xianming sighed gently. Our Radiant Saint Hall is one of the peak organizations in the Saint's world. My father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, so he's naturally an expert. However, the great demon's strength is just too terrifying. Even the leader of our Radiant Saint Hall has been heavily injured by him. My father obviously can't protect me, so I could only leave the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 2244. I never thought that person would be so powerful. The Radiant Saint Hall is a peak organization in the Saint's world, yet he can take them on by himself. However, what I don't understand is why such a supreme expert would lower himself and attack the Divine Kings of Radiant without any regard for his dignity. Does he have some sort of irreconcilable grievance with your Radiant Saint Hall? Jianshun asked in confusion. However, Xianming shook his head without any hesitation. He said, although I don't know why that great demon would attack us Divine Kings of Radiant Saint Hall, there's one thing I'm certain of. The great demon doesn't have any deep grievances with our Radiant Saint Hall. If he did, he would be able to deal unimaginable damage to our Radiant Saint Hall with his invincible strength. However, he just didn't do that. If that's the case, it's rather strange. Is there another reason why he specifically targeted the Divine Kings of Radiant Saint Hall? Jianshun murmured, I don't know about that. Anyway, in those years, all the Divine Kings of our Radiant Saint Hall were in a constant state of fear because of the great demon. They all began to flee the Radiant Saint Hall, finding places to hide as they were afraid that the great demon would find them. However, even with that being the case, many of the Divine Kings of Radiant Saint Hall were found by the great demon and ended up in his hands. I don't know why the great demon has lost his mind. He specifically targets people who have reached the peak of the Divine King of Radiant Saint Hall and are about to condense soul trees. Even if people of other cultivation levels stand beside the great demon won't even glance at them. I've reached the peak of the Divine King of Radiant Saint Hall a long time ago. I'm about to condense a soul tree. Our soul trees are equivalent to your infinite primes. How can it be easy to go from Divine King to Infinite Prime? Moreover, due to the special laws that our Divine King of Radiant St. Hall comprehends, it's much more difficult for us to break through compared to you breaking through from Divine King to Infinite Prime, Xianming said in low spirits. So, you stayed here for hundreds of thousands of years, and you're still in the realm of the Divine King of Light? Jianxin asked. He had learned an extremely important piece of information from Xianming. It was much more difficult for Radiant Saint Masters to break through than fighters. It's not that my talent is bad, but it's because of this great array. Everything has its pros and cons. This formation might be able to hide from the secrets of the heavens and make all divination methods useless, allowing me to live through this long period of time safely. But it is also because of the existence of this formation that it bypasses the secrets of the heavens and interferes with the laws. It makes it extremely difficult for me to comprehend the laws of the world in this formation, and I am unable to break through for a long time. If I don't condense a God's soul tree, I won't dare to go outside. Although a long time has passed, no one can guarantee that the great devil won't suddenly find me. In order to obtain Jianxin's trust and obtain Jianxin's help, Xianming spoke a lot. He told Jianxin everything that had happened without holding anything back. This was because he knew that he could only survive if he relied on Jianxin. Although he did not know what was so extraordinary about the dilapidated ancient pagoda that was full of sword marks, he firmly believed in Senior Su's words. Jianxin, the concealment formation has been damaged. It probably can't hide from the secrets of the heavens anymore. Can you let me in right now? I'm afraid that the great devil will sense my existence if I stay here for too long. Although this place is far enough away from the Radiant St. Hall, you know that peak experts like the great devil often have many tricks up their sleeves. Xianming looked at Jianxin hopefully. He no longer dared to show any hatred towards Jianxin. Jianxin smiled. Of course I can. It's just that I'm extremely curious about many things regarding Radiant Saint Masters. In the future, I might have some matters regarding Radiant Saint Masters that I need to ask Brother Xianming about. I hope Brother Xianming will be generous when the time comes. Xianming beamed with joy. No problem, no problem. Of course there's no problem. As long as it doesn't involve secrets of our Radiant St. Hall, everything else is fine. Afterwards, Jianxin took out the Inata Tower and stowed the uneasy Xianming away. Heavens, what a large miniature world. Jianxin, the level of this tower must be quite high. What terrifying sword chi. There's actually a large region of shattered space up ahead. Just how vast is this miniature world? Here, I can actually comprehend the complete laws without any hindrance. I don't need to comprehend the laws in the concealment formation. I can guarantee that as long as I cultivate in such an environment, the bottleneck to the God Spirit tree won't hold me back for long. Xianming cried out as soon as he entered the world of the Inata Tower. Jianxin shook his head with a smile when he heard Xianming's voice. He looked at the damaged Inata Tower with mixed feelings. He had exposed the Inata Tower several times in the Poseidon Palace. Although the Supreme Divine King might not be able to recognize the Inata Tower with his knowledge, he knew that once the experts behind them learned of the Inata Tower's appearance and strength, it was extremely likely that they would be able to guess the origins of the Inata Tower, which would be extremely disadvantageous to him. After all, those people were not like the old woman. They did not want the Inata Tower at all. This tower probably won't be able to remain in my possession for much longer, Jianxin murmured to himself. The artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace was right. The Inata Tower was a hot potato. Although he had brought it up from a lower world, it did not belong to him. It would return to the heavenly palace of Bishing in the end. This was because he did not possess the strength to protect the Inata Tower. Jianxin, I feel like this place is probably not as simple as it seems on the surface. At this moment, Kea emerged from the Inata Tower. He studied the surroundings sternly as he said sternly. Jianxin became stern when he heard that. He looked at Kea with shining eyes and asked, Kea, what have you sensed? Do you sense a faint presence of desolation in the surroundings? The presence seems extremely ancient, with a sense of age. It seems to have existed for countless years. Kea closed his eyes and sensed carefully as he said softly to Jinshin. Jinshin also closed his eyes and sensed carefully. However, he shook his head in the end. He sensed nothing. The presence is too faint. It seems to have fused with the space here, becoming one with the world. Kea continued before pausing. And I have an extremely strange feeling. The concealing formation in the outer space is not natural. Instead, it's cast down by someone. What did you say? Jinshin's face immediately changed when he heard Kea's last sentence. He cried out. This was because he thought of the old woman. She was the grand disciple of the Inata, Grand Prime, and she was a powerful primordial realm expert herself. She was extremely knowledgeable, yet she insisted that the formation was natural. So how did Kea conclude that it was man-made? I have a feeling that the concealing formation is not natural. Instead, it's cast down by someone. Kea stressed once again. Jinshin looked at Kea silently. Was Kea's intuition even better than the old woman's? However, in the next moment, Jinshin's face suddenly changed. He could not help but clutch his chest as confusion and surprise filled his face. Jinshin, what's wrong? Kea immediately supported Jinshin when she sensed Jinshin's abnormality. She showed concern. Chapter 2245. A sliver of surprise appeared in Kea's eyes when he heard that. He looked at Jinshin, and only after a moment of silence did he ask in doubt. Say, do you think the sudden change in your drop of ancient Skywolf's bloodline has something to do with this place? That shouldn't be the case. Jinshin shook his head. He struggled to believe Kea's guess. However, just when Jinshin said that, his eyes suddenly narrowed. A sliver of surprise appeared in his eyes, and he stared into the distance. He said, I can vaguely sense a call through the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The call comes from up ahead. Jinshin's eyes became extremely bright. He stared in the direction of the call as he became surprised and doubtful. Is it really as you said? Is the change in the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf really related to this place? Let's go take a look first, said Kea. He was filled with curiosity as well. Afterwards, Jinshin and Kea did not stay any longer. They immediately made their way to the location of the call. The meteor was very large, but Jinshin and Kea were Divine King cultivators after all. With their speed, they arrived at the location of the call in just a short while. It was a wasteland. The plains were deathly silent as far as the eye could see. There were no plants at all. It was extremely desolate. Is it here? Kea looked around and asked Jinshin. Jinshin said nothing. He glanced around before closing his eyes. He searched for the location of the call through the connection between him and the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. It's here. It's beneath our feet. Jinshin opened his eyes and looked at the tough rock beneath his feet. He immediately expanded the senses of his soul, which burrowed into the depths of the ground like an invisible sword. However, when his spiritual sense penetrated 1,000 feet into the ground, it was blocked by a mysterious force and could not go any further. Deep underground, there seems to be another formation, said Kea. Clearly, he had also detected the situation underground with his divine sense. Break in, Jinshin said firmly. Afterwards, he took out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. As he channeled his chaotic force into it, the sword immediately shone with star-like light. Under Jinshin's swing, it directly stabbed into the ground in an attempt to create a tunnel that led to the depths of the earth. Boom! Amidst the deafening roar, the hard rock under Jinshin's feet suddenly shattered into pieces. Amidst the flying debris, a large crater more than 10 meters deep appeared. This meteorite was extremely hard. The might of Jinshin's sword was enough to split a massive meteorite in half. However, it was only able to leave behind a 10-meter deep crater. Jinshin, I'll help you. Kea took action as well. The laws of destruction descended. Like threads, they turned into secondary divine chains that shot towards the ground as well. Immediately, deafening booms constantly rang out. Under Jinshin and Kea's attacks, the ground shook violently. Spiderweb-like cracks appeared and dust filled the surroundings. Under their continuous attacks that were no weaker than the Divine King, the tunnel rapidly deepened. However, the deeper they went, the harder the rock became. As a result, as the tunnel rapidly deepened, their progress became slower and slower. In the end, it took Jinshin and Kea 3 days to get through the short tunnel. They finally saw the formation hidden underground. What appeared in front of them was an ancient stone door that seemed to have been there for countless years. The formation engraved on the stone door was extremely profound. It seemed to contain the truths of the world, hiding endless mysteries. It also gave off a chilling, terrifying killing intent. Kea stared closely at the formation on the stone door. He became stern, which he rarely did. He said with a heavy voice, "I can sense that this formation is very terrifying, extremely terrifying. It's countless times more terrifying than the formation we came across before." Jinshin stared at the simple stone door in front of him silently. As he stood before the stone door, the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him seemed to boil. Not only did it pulsate abnormally, giving off a fiery presence, but it also seemed like it wanted to break free from his control and break out of his body. The abnormality of the power of the bloodline allowed Jinshin to conclude that this place was either related to the ancient Skywolf, or there was something within the stone door that resonated with the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Judging from the profoundness of this stone gates formation, the concealment formation that was set up outside might not have been naturally formed. Instead, it might have been set up by a peerless expert whose cultivation had reached the peak of perfection. However, what I don't understand is why such a powerful concealment formation would have a killing formation that clearly doesn't match it. Jinshin asked in confusion. He could still remember how he and Kea had been forced to hide in the Inata Tower by a killing formation when they first entered the concealment formation. The killing formation was indeed very powerful, but it could only kill infinite primes at most. Compared to the concealing formation that could obscure the heavenly secrets and prevent the peak-level experts of the Saints' world from divining, the difference in level was just too great. That's because that killing formation was left behind by Xianming in the past. At this moment, an old voice rang out from behind. The old woman had already appeared behind Jinshin and Kea at some unknown time. She hovered there silently. Xianming's father was one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. When he left the Radiant Saint Hall, he carried many life-saving items with him. The killing formation you encountered in the concealment formation earlier was cast down by Xianming using a formation disc to prevent outsiders from entering, explained the old woman. Then she looked at Kea and said, "Young lady, it looks like you're not simple at all. Even I failed to see through the mysteries of the concealment formation. I always thought it was created naturally, but you saw through it with a single glance." "You praise me too much, senior. It was just a feeling," Kea said modestly. The old woman looked at Kea deeply and said, "If it's really a feeling, then your feeling is far too terrifying." Jinshin coughed gently and pointed at the stone door. He changed the topic and said, "Senior, let's study this stone door instead. May I ask if Senior has any methods to get through the formation on the stone door?" The old woman sighed gently when she heard that. She said, "Let's go. Let's leave this place. Don't even think about the stone door. Although even I'm very curious about the secret behind the stone door, it's not something we can touch. This is because even I fear the formation on it. If I'm not wrong, it was left behind by a Grand Exalt. Only Grand Exalts who have become the heavenly ways and control the heavenly ways can cast down the concealment formation outside to the point where it seems like it was created naturally. This formation cannot be destroyed. You'll die if you touch it." The old woman stared at the stone door as she became extremely stern. With that, she turned around and left. Jinshin did not plan on leaving. He stared at the stone door quietly and hesitated for a while. In the end, he made up his mind and released the restraints on the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Chapter 2246. As soon as the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline came in contact with the formation on the stone door, it immediately fused with it. At the same time, The Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door immediately erupted with blinding light. At that moment, the tremendous energy hidden in the formation seemed to awaken from its slumber. As the energy surged, the entire meteor shook violently, radiating with a terrifying presence that could destroy the world. "Who told you to mess around?" The old woman's expression suddenly changed before she could get very far away. She turned around and called out to Jianshun and Kea. She looked at the stone door with undisguised fear. Afterwards, she arrived before Jianshun and Kea in a flash. She grabbed their shoulders and was about to take them away as quickly as possible. However, in the next moment, the old woman paused. A smear of surprise appeared on her face as she immediately stared at the stone door with interest. The Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door began to slowly recede to the sides as it radiated with surging energy. In just a while, the Grand Exalt's formation that even the old woman feared completely vanished. Only a droplet of blood remained. "What's going on?" The change stunned the old woman. She stared at the droplet of blood deeply and said, "Where did this droplet of blood come from?" "This is the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. I obtained it out of luck on the spatial battleship with Senior," said Jianshun. He already knew that the old woman was not an evil person, so he trusted the old woman a little more. "It's actually the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline," exclaimed the old woman. She stared at the stone door that was filled with the presence of time with mixed feelings. She murmured to herself, "Was this left behind by past Grand Exalts, the ancient Skywolf? Or perhaps this is the place where the ancient Skywolf passed away?" "Senior, the ancient Skywolf was a past Grand Exalt?" Jianshun was surprised. As the name implied, past Grand Exalts were naturally Grand Exalts that had appeared in history. They were not people of the present. The old woman clearly knew quite a lot about the secrets of Grand Exalts. She said leisurely, "That's right. The ancient Skywolf was indeed a Grand Exalt that had appeared in history. He existed in an era before the 7 Grand Exalts. It was an era even earlier than the 7 Grand Exalts. From the moment the Saints' world was formed until now, probably no one aside from peak experts like Grand Exalts, probably no one knows just how long it has existed. It has been split into many different eras, so it's very difficult for anyone to say just how many eras it has existed. However, according to what I know, the era before the era of the 7 Grand Exalts was the era of the ancient Skywolf. Only after all the peak experts of the ancient Skywolf's era passed away did the current era of the 7 Grand Exalts arrive. In other words, the Saints' world has given birth to many Grand Exalts over the long years." Jianshun sighed emotionally. "Of course, the Saints' world has already gone through who knows how many eras, and a Grand Exalt has appeared in every era." The old woman recalled the past and murmured, "Many years ago, I was fortunate enough to see the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing when I followed my master. I remember the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing telling my master something. She said that although the Saints' world has gone through different eras, there will never be more than 10 Grand Exalts in a single major world regardless of the era." The old woman smiled self-deprecatingly when she reached there. "Everyone says that once you reach godhood, you'll break free from the limits of life and live as long as the world. You'll live forever. But in reality, no one can truly live forever. Even Grand Exalts who have comprehended the laws to the limit and become the heavenly ways will die. For example, during the battle 3 million years ago, the 7 Grand Exalts of the Saints' world either died or were injured. Even my founding ancestor, the Anita Grand Exalt, met with a mishap. Even sovereigns of the world as powerful as Grand Exalts can't truly live as long as the world, let alone those below Grand Exalts. What eternal life? What life as long as the heavens and earth? In my opinion, all of that is just a joke." The old woman laughed like a madman as she reached the end of her sentence. She seemed to have seen through the true meaning of life and death. What joy was there in life? What fear was there in death? At this moment, Jianshun had already arrived before the simple stone door. He slowly pushed it open. Immediately, A dense and pure presence of desolation surged out. It possessed the power to reverse the laws of the world. Jianshan was the first to be cleansed by the presence of ways, which made his heart tremble violently. Under the cleansing of the presence, he immediately felt like he had fused with the world. He closed his eyes and seemed to be able to clearly see the 3,000 ways that had wove together into a huge net. He could sense the 3,000 ways, and with a grab, he seemed to be able to grasp the laws firmly. He felt like he was in control of them. As for the old woman, her mind was also greatly shaken. Her face was filled with shock, and she could not help but exclaim, Could this be the legendary origin of the great Tao? The old woman's face became extremely mixed. Unlike Jianshan, she understood extremely well just how precious and rare the presence of the origin of ways was. It was a treasure that even grand primes would fight tooth and nail over. The old woman immediately closed her eyes and began to comprehend as much as she could, absorbing the presence of the origin of ways. At the same time, Kea could not help but close his eyes as well. He began to absorb the presence of the origin of ways that leaked out from the stone door. At this moment, even Kea failed to sense that a black hole had silently appeared in the depths of her sea of consciousness. As soon as the surging presence of the origin of ways entered her body, it surged into the black hole and vanished completely. Over 50% of the origin of ways that leaked out from the stone door had been absorbed by Kea. Even with Jianshan and the old woman working together, the origin of ways they absorbed was nowhere near as much as Kea alone. The origin of ways. It's actually the origin of ways. Qing Suo, wake up. The sword spirits that had remained silent for quite some time within Jianshan's body were alarmed as well. It really is the origin of ways. This is something left behind by a grand exalt after his soul returns to the world. It's one of the most precious things in the world. Xing, take it. Afterwards, the sword spirits began to move as well. They hid within Jianshan's body, turning into yin and yang qi. They rapidly revolved in the form of a yin and yang fish. As they revolved, an invisible suction immediately appeared, constantly absorbing the origin of ways. Chapter 22:47. However, at that moment, the three of them could not help but enter a state of selflessness under the cleansing of the origin of the ways. They were immersed in the comprehension of the 3,000 ways. As a result, none of them could sense how much origin of the ways the others had absorbed. At the same time, the majestic Poseidon Palace remained like a primordial beast on the Hinyu, playing extremely far away from where Jianshan and the others were. Although it had already been several days since the Palace of Poseidon closed, the experts gathered in the region of outer space still had not completely left. It was just that their numbers had decreased by 70% compared to a few days ago. These people gathered before the Palace of Poseidon, standing very far away from it. They either stared at the Palace of Poseidon calmly or with flickering eyes. They did not seem like they planned on leaving at all. A rather large meteor hovered silently near these people. The solitary sword ancestor sat on it with his sword on his back. He also stopped there. I come from the Shangyun clan of the Lone Heaven Plain. I represent the Shangyun clan and hope to meet the master of the Palace of Poseidon. I am the current leader of the Tiana clan on the God-Barren Plain. I hope to meet the new master of the Palace of Poseidon and discuss. We come from a glorious amethyst planet on the 81st Great Planet. Similar voices rang out from time to time. The people who remained there all came from large organizations from various places. After learning that the new master of the Palace of Poseidon was still young and possessed a low cultivation, they all wanted to lend a helping hand and befriend him as soon as possible. They even directly tried to rope him into their side. However, the Palace of Poseidon did not respond at all. The artifact spirit of the Palace of Poseidon did not respond to their requests either. However, these experts who came from large forces, had prominent statuses, and had extraordinary cultivations themselves, did not show the slightest bit of impatience. They calmly waited outside and quietly waited. Clearly, Xiao Man had become the most popular figure in the current Saints world after becoming the new master of the Palace of Poseidon. At this moment, the palace of Poseidon suddenly shone with dazzling blue light. It hovered in outer space like an ocean. The palace of Poseidon was enveloped by the blue light, shooting off into the depths of outer space as a streak of light. Many experts from large organizations sighed inside when they saw this. They did not pursue, as they understood that they had already lost the opportunity to befriend the new master of the palace of Poseidon. However, this was not the case for everyone. At this moment, an ancient sword cut through the air, cutting through the path of the palace of Poseidon. It forcefully stopping the palace of Poseidon. The solitary sword ancestor, who originally sat on the meteor, had appeared before the palace of Poseidon at some point in time. He wielded his ancient sword and blocked the path of the palace of Poseidon. "Old man, what are you trying to do by blocking my path?" The artifact spirit of the palace of Poseidon appeared. He stood on the top of the palace of Poseidon with his short body as he pointed at the solitary sword ancestor and roared out furiously. The corpse of Old Man's disciple is still in the palace of Poseidon. This is the presence of Old Man's disciple. Hand him over to the old man, and the old man will leave immediately, the solitary sword ancestor said emotionlessly. With a wave of his hand, he sent a strand of Gongzheng's presence to the artifact spirit of the palace of Poseidon. The artifact spirit of the palace of Poseidon sensed it silently and snorted impatiently. "This is your disciple. Take him and make way." As he said that, a beggar-like corpse in tattered clothes flew out from the palace of Poseidon. Afterwards, the palace of Poseidon directly shot off into the distance, vanishing into the depths of the vast cosmos. The solitary sword ancestor looked at Gongzheng's corpse, and a sliver of pain appeared on his face. Afterwards, he pressed a finger towards Gongzheng's forehead and secretly used a secret technique. Immediately, the scene of Gongzheng's death clearly appeared in the solitary sword ancestor's mind. He personally saw a god artifact shine with dazzling starlight, stabbing into Gongzheng's forehead with lightning speed. Does anyone recognize this person? The solitary sword ancestor's eyes were cold. He extended a finger towards the space there, and Jinshin's appearance immediately appeared in an extremely clear manner. "It's Jinshin! It's Jinshin!" Immediately, a few of the divine kings who had yet to leave with their seniors cried out, "He's Jinshin, the person who helped the girl in the palace of Poseidon?" With that, even the seniors beside the divine king became stunned. They were all surprised. "Leave Jinshin behind." The solitary sword ancestor bellowed out. Killing intent surged from him as he turned into a resplendent streak of light, pursuing towards the palace of Poseidon. The great perfection of sword spirit. I never thought I'd reach the great perfection of sword spirit so quickly. Jinshan slowly opened his eyes. There was undisguised joy and excitement in his eyes. A few years ago, he had reached the major achievement of sword spirit in the palace of Poseidon, allowing his chaotic body to reach the 12th layer, making him a divine king. Originally, he thought that it would take an extremely long time for his laws of the sword to break through again and reach the great perfection of sword spirit from the major achievement of sword spirit. However, he had never thought that in just a few years, his laws of the sword would break through again, reaching the great perfection of sword spirit. Not only could the great perfection of sword spirit allow Jinshin to condense a fourth strand of profound sword chi, but his chaotic body had also formally reached the major achievement of sword spirit. The 13th layer of the chaotic body was the major achievement of sword spirit. The 14th, 15th, and final 18th layer all belong to the major achievement of sword spirit. Beyond the 18th layer belonged to the great perfection of the chaotic body. Since ancient times, no one had ever reached this level of cultivation. I have quite a lot of cultivation resources on me right now. Several tens of millions of fire divine crystals, the 2 god-tier heavenly resources of unknown grades in Grand Poseidon's ring, the spoils from the divine medicinal garden, and the resources in the divine king space ring. This should be enough for me to reach the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Jinshin was filled with eagerness. He had obtained over 100 million fire divine crystals in the palace of Poseidon. Even though he had given most of them to his sister, there were still several tens of millions left. Jianshun, you've finally woken up, Kaya's voice rang out from beside him. Jianshun dismissed his thoughts and looked over. He discovered that Kaya and the old woman had already woken up before him. They were looking at him from nearby. How long did I spend comprehending? Jianshun asked. When he looked at Kaya again, he discovered that Kaya had already reached the peak of mid-divine king. Jianshun was extremely surprised by Kaya's progress. After all, when Kaya cultivated in the Tianyuan family, the rate of his cultivation had left him astounded. It could be said that Kaya had gone from the origin realm to over-god in a single stroke. However, he discovered that ever since Kaya reached the level of divine king, his cultivation speed had become abnormally slow, which left him puzzled. Kaya glanced at the old woman before saying to Jianshun, I'm the first one to wake up. You've already spent a month comprehending since I woke up. Young man, it looks like you're quite lucky to actually find the origin of ways. That's something extremely precious in the world. Even I've benefited from it. Not only have my wounds healed with the origin of ways, but my comprehension of laws has deepened as well. The old woman looked at Jianshun with mixed feelings. P.S. Please listen to Xiaoyao's official WeChat account. Once there are any updates or changes in the future, Xiaoyao will inform you through WeChat. Search XingXingCAO 110 in simpler terms. It was Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a police number. Chapter 2248. The Origin of Ways? Senior, was the presence earlier the origin of ways? Jianshun asked curiously. That's right. It was the origin of ways. The origin of ways is extremely precious in the Saints' world. It's so precious that even Grand Primes will fight over it. This is because the origin of ways is something left behind by sovereigns of the world who have comprehended laws to the limit after passing away. Every single origin of ways is condensed from their will when they were alive, the crystallization of the condensed laws. As long as you haven't become a Grand Exalt, absorbing the origin of ways will bring you great benefits. There are two ways for Grand Exalts to die. The first is when they die in battle against experts of the same level. It's impossible for any Grand Exalt who dies in battle to leave behind the origin of ways. The second is when they pass away in their dwelling like the ancient skywolf, dispersing from the world. Only Grand Exalts who pass away like the ancient skywolf will leave behind the origin of ways, the old woman explained slowly to Qinfeng. After that, she stared at Jianshun with shining eyes. Do you understand just how precious the origin of ways is now? So this is where the so-called origin of ways comes from. Jianshun was very unsettled. He looked at the stone door with mixed feelings and said, I never thought that this place would actually be where the ancient sky wolf passed away. Jianshun sighed gently. He bowed deeply towards the simple stone door before him politely before entering it. As soon as he set foot in the stone door, Jianshun immediately felt like he had left the saint's world and arrived in another space. He knew that the stone door was equivalent to a spatial tunnel. The moment he set foot in the stone door, he had entered a miniature world. Jianshun looked around and discovered that the miniature world was not very large. It was empty. Apart from a small wooden hut enveloped by a barrier at the end of the miniature world, there was only a droplet of blood that hovered in the center of the miniature world. The droplet of blood was the size of a thumb. It hovered in the air silently like a ruby. When Jianshun looked at the drop of blood, his mind suddenly shook, and his pupils instantly shrank to the size of his eyes. This was because he could sense a ripple of energy that was as vast as the ocean from this drop of blood. This seemingly insignificant drop of blood contained a terrifying might that could destroy the world. This drop of blood should be the primordial skywolf's essence blood. Only sovereigns of the world like Grand Exalts, who have become the laws of the world, can allow their essence blood to remain as powerful as before after who knows how many billions of years. The old woman and Kaya arrived as well. The old woman stared at the droplet of blood extremely sternly and said in thought, The energy within this droplet of blood makes even me shiver in fear. If it erupts, even peak chaotic primes won't be able to escape death. Be careful. Do not touch this droplet of blood." However, before the old woman had even finished speaking, the droplet of blood that made her shiver suddenly began to tremble gently. Afterwards, under the old woman's shocked gaze, the droplet of essence blood from the primordial skywolf slowly approached the power of the bloodline within Jianshan. The eyes of Jianshan and the other two narrowed when they saw this. Their hearts began to thump uncontrollably as they became filled with some panic and unease. After all, the droplet of blood had been personally left behind by the primordial skywolf. It was so powerful and terrifying that even the old woman shivered in fear. If something really happened and the terrifying power within the blood completely erupted, the consequences would be unthinkable. Jianshan had already taken out the Inata tower. He stared at the two droplets of blood nervously as he prepared for the worst. In the end, the two droplets of blood finally approached each other and slowly fused together, becoming a larger droplet of blood. The energy within was calm, without any instability. Jianshan and the other two all let out a sigh of relief when they saw this. Their hearts finally settled down as well. "See if you can continue to control this droplet of blood," the old woman said to Jianshan. Jianshan nodded. Immediately, he used his connection with the power of the primordial skywolf's bloodline to attempt to control it. Immediately, the power of the bloodline that had fused with the essence blood seemed to be called out too. It flew towards Jianshan. Jianshan rejoiced inside. He discovered that he could still control the power of the bloodline like before. However, he dared not let the power of the bloodline return to his body right now. Instead, he controlled the power of the bloodline to hover before him as he studied it seriously and sternly. He wanted to ensure that the droplet of blood did not possess any problems or hidden dangers. After a careful inspection, Jianshan discovered that the power of the bloodline that originally belonged to him had not truly fused with the essence blood. It seemed like the power of the bloodline had wrapped around the essence blood, constantly absorbing the tremendous energy within the essence blood, strengthening itself at all times. Even though the essence blood had been personally left behind by the primordial skywolf, it was only a ball of terrifying energy right now. Faced with the constant devouring of the power of the bloodline, it was completely at his mercy. It did not resist or resist at all. Jianshan was overjoyed by this discovery. He had been worried that the power of the bloodline would not be able to increase. As his strength increased, the assistance it could provide him was basically negligible. However, he had never thought that he would come across such a great fortuitous encounter in the blink of an eye, unexpectedly finding a droplet of essence blood left behind by the ancient skywolf. It's just a pity that the power of the essence blood can only be absorbed by the power of the bloodline that shares the same origin as the ancient skywolf. Otherwise, it would instinctively resist the power, leading to severe consequences. It's just that from the looks of it, the power of the bloodline will still need quite some time to absorb all the energy in the essence blood, Jianshan thought. He completely stopped worrying and absorbed the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline back into his body. Afterwards, Jianshan looked at the wooden hut enveloped by the barrier. Since this miniature world was where the ancient skywolf had passed away, it went without saying that the ancient skywolf's legacy would be left behind in the wooden hut. This was the legacy of a grand exalt. Even with Jianshan's chaotic body, he struggled to resist the temptation. Chapter 2249. Although he had heard what the old woman had said, Jianshan did not give up. This was a grand exalt's legacy. It was so tempting that he struggled to remain calm. Afterwards, Jianshan continued to control the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline to leave his body in an attempt to pass through the barrier. However, Jianshan failed this time. He used the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline as support and tried everything he could think of, but it all ended in failure. It seemed like it was just as the old woman had said. Only those with the bloodline of the Skywolf clan could pass through the barrier. Don't even think about attacking the barrier and exhausting its energy. That's because it's useless before a barrier personally cast down by a grand exalt, the old woman said from behind. With that, she turned around and left. Jinshin looked at the indestructible barrier in pity and sighed helplessly. He knew that the legacy of the ancient Skywolf was not something he could touch. In the end, he could only leave with Kea reluctantly. Passing through the stone door, Jinshin and Kea reappeared on a desolate meteor. They flew up from a depth of several thousand meters and discovered the old woman standing on the edge of the tunnel. She stared at the night sky sternly. They've come. They've come even faster than I imagined. The concealing formation has gradually lost its effect. The old woman sighed deeply as she stood there. Are they the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing? Jinshin frowned as well. He also raised his head to look at the pitch-black, starless sky. He felt rather nervous as well. The Inata Tower was still on him. That's right. It's them. They're the most loyal guards of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Every single divine general has been carefully selected from thousands of prodigies by the heavenly palace of Bishing. Every single one of them has been nurtured by the heavenly palace of Bishing without holding back. As a result, these divine generals are extremely powerful. Only those supreme prodigies of the same level can contend against them. They're very difficult to deal with, the old woman said slowly. Afterwards, she looked at Jinshin and Kea and said sincerely, the two of you should leave quickly. Leave before the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing arrive, just in case you cause unnecessary trouble. The origin of ways from before should have belonged to the two of you completely, but I failed to control it and absorb a portion of it. As a result, I owe you a favor. However, I won't be able to escape today. Moreover, I've spent so many years running for my life, so I probably won't be able to repay you, the old woman said rather guiltily. Senior, why don't you enter the tower? We can escape together. Jinshin took out the Inata Tower and asked the old woman. The old woman was not a bad person. She had only been hunted down because of her master. He truly wanted to help the old woman. The old woman shook her head and said with a voice full of bitterness, after running for so many years, this old woman is tired. I don't want to continue living the life of a fugitive, so I will choose this place as my burial ground. To be able to die where the ancient Skywolf passed away is a form of honor for me. The old woman looked at Jinshin deeply. Listen to my advice. The tower in your hands is a hot potato. With your strength, you won't be able to keep it. Find an opportunity to return it to the heavenly palace of Bishing. You have to remember that you can't let the tower end up in the hands of the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Otherwise, all the merit will be taken away by them. You have to personally return it to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Only then will you benefit the most. You might even be protected by the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. In the current Saints world, being protected by the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing is more important than anything else because the first majesty is one of the most powerful existences in the current Saints world aside from the great grand exalts. Boom! At this moment, a deafening rumble rang out from the sky. A terrifying pulse of energy that even made Jinshin shiver wreaked havoc in outer space. The sudden change of events caused the expressions of Jinshin and the others to change. Oh no, they've actually come so quickly. They must have used a secret technique to directly teleport over from the distant outer space. It looks like they've made up their minds to kill me this time. They're not giving me any time to catch my breath at all, said the old woman in a deep voice. Afterwards, she looked at Jinshin and Kea and said urgently, the two of you leave first. Leave here as quickly as possible. Don't get caught up in this. With that, the old woman charged into the sky. She radiated with the powerful presence of the primordial realm without holding back at all. She charged into outer space with determination and fearlessness, engaging in a final battle against the divine general who had chased her. The concealment array outside the meteorite had already been shattered. A broken array disk had fallen from the void and shattered into pieces. Xianming had cast down the formation disk here. It was of quite a high grade, possessing the power to kill infinite primes. However, under the attacks of the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. It shattered before it could even unleash its power. Without the obstruction of the formation, the starlight that had been blocked out finally appeared before Jianshan and Kao once again. However, the two of them were in no mood to admire the enchanting starry sky right now. Instead, they stared at outer space sternly. Booms rang out in outer space. They could clearly see the old woman engage in an intense battle with two experts who shone with golden light. Primordial realm laws interweaved as they clashed violently, causing the surroundings to collapse and the sun to dim. The entire space shook as spatial cracks appeared one after another. Kea, let's go. Jianshan glanced at the terrifying ripples of energy in outer space one last time. He decisively took out a small spaceship from a space ring and left with Kea in another direction. He was unable to interfere with the battle between the old woman and the two divine generals. Even if he had reached the great perfection of sword spirit, he would still be unable to help. Bang! Suddenly, Jinshan's spaceship seemed to collide with an invisible wall as soon as it left the meteor. With a great shudder, it came to a sudden halt. Chapter 2250. Doesn't that mean we won't be able to leave here? Kaya's face changed slightly as well. Jianshan stood in the small spaceship as he stared at the three people fighting in the distance with an uneasy expression. With a flip of his hand, he took out a cosmic movement talisman. Jianshan was about to activate the cosmic movement talisman when he hesitated. He only had one universal shift talisman left. Unless it was a life and death crisis, he really couldn't bear to use it. He also understood that the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing would not develop any enmity towards him. After all, his brother Mingdong was the 9th majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. With that connection, the divine generals would definitely not drag him down. However, what he truly worried about was whether the two powerful divine generals would sense the Inata Tower. If they sensed the existence of the Inata Tower, the Inata Tower would definitely leave him. At this moment, Kea grabbed Jinshan's hand and stopped him from activating the cosmic movement talisman. He said, "It's not a life-threatening situation right now, so don't use this talisman for now. Perhaps the situation won't develop in a bad way." Hopefully. Jianshan loosened his grip on the cosmic movement talisman. He turned around and stared at the intense battle in outer space sternly. In outer space, the old woman fought against the two divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing by herself. Her battle was extremely intense. Laws clashed time and time again like chains, causing space to collapse and countless stars to dim. Not long after the three of them began to fight, the old woman began to show signs of defeat. Very soon, she vomited blood from the attacks of the two divine generals and was blown away. She just happened to fly towards the small spaceship under Jinshan's control. Jianshan hesitated slightly before flying out of the spaceship decisively when he saw this. He caught the old woman. The old woman was extremely pale. She was covered in blood. She coughed violently and said with a hoarse and weak voice, "Don't interfere with this matter, just in case you get dragged into it." That was what she said on the surface, but a secret message that only Jianshan could hear rang out in his head. You can't take out the Inata Tower. As long as you hide the Inata Tower properly, the two divine generals definitely won't be able to discover it. Jianshan felt like he had been reassured by the old woman's message. He finally let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, the sword spirits hid themselves deeply. Jianshan was no longer the puny cultivator of the past. As his strength rapidly increased, he possessed an even greater ability to conceal himself. Coupled with the secret cooperation of the sword spirits, he was confident that even chaotic primes would struggle to discover the existence of the sword spirits. Suddenly, Jianshan felt his surroundings become dazzling. He quickly turned his head and saw the two divine generals from the heavenly palace of Bishing. They wore standard golden armor and appeared nearby like they had teleported. The divine armors on their bodies gave off a dazzling golden light that was as dazzling as the sun. The two divine generals became hazy and blurry as they bathed in the golden light. They seemed like gods, dignified and inviolable. Jianchen immediately arrived, and his body suddenly sank. His clothes seemed to be suppressed by an invisible force, sticking tightly to his body. The terrifying presences from the two divine generals made Jianchen feel like a mountain was crushing down on him. He felt like he was suffocating. Chaotic primes. Jianchen's heart shivered as he became extremely stern. Kea emerged from the spatial battleship as well. He stood beside Jianchen and also stared at the two divine generals sternly. He was filled with caution. However, the two divine generals did not even glance at Jianchen and Kea. In their eyes, the divine king was no different from an ant. They were unable to pique their interest. The two of them looked at the old woman. One of them said sternly, "Su Ran, you won't be able to escape this time. Su Ran, you've already fled for millions of years. You must be tired, while the two of us have chased you for millions of years as well. We're tired as well. Let's end this once and for all so that we can report back." The other divine general sighed gently. His voice was filled with mixed feelings. Su Ran's master was the Eneta Grand Exalt disciple, while they were loyal guards that the heavenly palace of Bishing had nurtured carefully. Both of them knew many secret techniques, including many secret techniques for fleeing. As a result, their pursuit had lasted for millions of years. Only today could they finally end this once and for all. After fleeing for so many years, I am indeed tired. Being able to die in your hands today is a kind of release for me. Do it. The old woman's expression was calm. She had long since accepted that she would definitely die. She had truly disregarded life and death. However, the two of them have nothing to do with me. They've only come here by accident, so I hope you don't make things difficult for them. The old woman glanced at Jianchen and Kea as a sliver of guilt appeared in her eyes. Jianchen saw the guilt in the old woman's eyes. Naturally, he knew that it came from the origin of ways. "Our mission is only you," said one of the divine generals. He did not take Jianchen and Kea seriously at all. The old woman smiled miserably. Success and failure are due to the same person. Although Master created me, I also died because of Master. However, before I die, I still have to tell you that not only do I know nothing about the mistake my master made back then, but I also have nothing to do with it. At the same time, on a continent that was extremely far away from this place, a hazy figure that was enveloped in dense light sat cross-legged on a throne within a golden palace with a majestic aura. The laws around the figure were dense like a waterfall, and it seemed as if they had completely fused into one with the hazy figure, causing them to be unable to be distinguished from each other. This was truly a fusion with the ways, a fusion with the world. He represented the supreme state of the universe. At this moment, the hazy figure opened his eyes. What kind of eyes were they? They were cold, emotionless, and emotionless. They were extremely cold, and they seemed to be able to see through the past and the future with a single glance. Hall Spirit. At this moment, the person spoke. His voice was cold and had fused with all the music in the world, making it impossible to distinguish him. Master. An old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion appeared silently. He stood below and bowed towards the figure on the throne politely. From now on, stop the pursuit of Su Ran. The figure sitting cross-legged on the throne said coldly. Yes, Master. The figure on the throne seemed to possess boundless might. Every word and action of his represented the will of the world, like an imperial edict. The ruddy old man did not dare to ask for the reason at all. He immediately accepted the order politely. In the next moment, a strange pulse of will radiated from the majestic golden divine hall. It passed through space and time, arriving extremely far away in an instant. It entered the minds of the two divine generals who were pursuing the old woman. Su Ran, from the First Majesty's attitude, we already know that you've been dragged into this by the Seventh Majesty. We don't want to kill you either, but the Hall Spirit has given orders. Unless the Majesties speak up to protect you, we can't disobey, a divine general said, but his voice came to an abrupt halt. He immediately looked at another divine general, and both of them were surprised. Hall Spirit. Ha 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 ha. It's actually the Hall Spirit. The person who wants to kill me is actually the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bishing. The old woman laughed miserably. Originally, she thought that the person who ordered her to be hunted down was one of the majesties, but she had never thought that it would actually be the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bishing. The two divine generals looked at Su-Ran with mixed feelings. After quite a while of silence, one of them said, "Su-Ran, congratulations. From today onwards, you are truly free." As they said that, the two divine generals slowly erased their presences. They no longer possessed any killing intent at all. "Congratulations? Ha ha ha. Are the two of you going to mock me before you kill me? That makes sense. I made the two of you hunt me down for several million years, wasting a lot of your cultivation time. Moreover, I've injured the two of you during that time, so it makes sense for you to resent me. If that's the case, you can mock me as much as you want, and then let me die a quick death so that I can truly be free." The old woman smiled miserably. Chapter 2251. The old woman was stunned when she heard that. Her laughter came to a halt as she stared at the two divine generals blankly. Disbelief filled her face. What did you say?" The old woman only asked blankly after quite a while. "The hall spirit has stopped hunting you down. Su-Ran, from today onwards, you're no longer a target of our pursuit. So, congratulations. You have truly regained your freedom," one of the divine generals said again. The old woman was completely stunned, as if she was unable to react to the news. Only quite a while later did she smile in a daze. She murmured, "I'm free. I'm free. I've actually regained my freedom." The old woman's laughter grew louder and louder. In the end, she actually seemed to have lost her mind. During the years she was hunted down, she had hoped more than once that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing would be able to see through everything and return her innocence, so that she would not be implicated by the mistake her master had made in the past. This was because she had truly been wronged. She had no idea about the great crimes her master had committed in the past. Unfortunately, even after waiting for so many years as she fled, the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing did not stop hunting her down. She finally understood a cruel reality, which was that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing really did not care about her at all. In simpler terms, she had nothing to do with the matter. Whether she was alive or dead, she probably would not raise the attention of the majesties. In particular, the first majesty had reached the peak of cultivation. It would not be difficult for her to find out whether she was innocent or not. In reality, Su-Ran already understood from the fact that the First Majesty had never personally dealt with her that the First Majesty knew she had been wronged, but she still did not speak up for her. Su-Ran had already understood something from the actions of the Majesties of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, which was that the Majesties were not targeting her. However, at the same time, they would not speak up for her. They did not take her seriously. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for her to survive until now. After all, she was only a chaotic prime at her peak condition. Chaotic primes were experts who reigned supreme across the 49 Great Plains and 81 great planets of the Saints' world. They possessed great statuses, but they were nothing before the heavenly palace of Bishing. As a result, after fleeing for his life for so many years, Su-Ran gradually lost all hope of surviving. He began to consider death, only seeking release. However, she had never thought that when she truly gave up on life and was about to die, the heavenly palace of Bishing would suddenly give up on killing her. The two divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing did not stay for long. After announcing the order to pardon Su-Ran, the two of them directly flew towards where the ancient Skywolf had passed away. They were chaotic primes, so they had discovered the existence of the dwelling as soon as they arrived. However, they had been busy fighting Su-Ran earlier, so they did not have the time to consider the dwelling. The stone door to the dwelling remained wide open. When Jianshun emerged from there, he did consider closing the stone door again. Instead, he was unable to find a way to close it. As a result, he could only leave the stone door wide open, allowing the two divine generals to enter the dwelling without any obstructions. However, they did not stay for long. After a short while, they left and returned to the heavenly palace of Bishing to recover their sight. Congratulations, Senior. You've been reborn. After the two divine generals left, Jianshan clasped his fist at the old woman and congratulated her sincerely. At this moment, the old woman gradually calmed down as well. She looked at the vast expanse of space above her and let out a long sigh. Her gaze was extremely mixed. After a while of thought, she said slowly, "The concealment formation has been destroyed, so the heavenly secrets of this place have been exposed. Before long, those peak experts skilled in divination will sense it. Very soon, this place will become a place of trouble. We can't stay here for long." The old woman glanced back at the small spaceship hovering in the air and said to Jinshin and Kea, "With your strength, traveling through space is extremely dangerous. Once you come across primordial realm space beasts, it'll be very difficult for you to fight back. Let's go. I'll leave with you." With that, the old woman directly made her way towards the spaceship parked nearby. Jianshin and Kea looked at each other before making their way towards the spaceship as well. Soon after, the small spaceship turned into a streak of light and left the place. "Where do you plan on going next?" The old woman sat down in the spaceship and healed with her eyes closed. After a moment of thought, Jianshan said, "Senior, to be honest, the two of us have lost our way in outer space. Right now, we just want to find a continent with a teleportation formation so that we can make further plans." The old woman nodded slightly. After quite a while of thought, she said, "The closest place to here is planet Tianming, one of the 81 great planets of the Saints' world. I have the coordinates of planet Tianming, so let's go there for now." Planet Tianming. Jinshan was surprised. Afterwards, he adjusted his direction with the coordinates he obtained from the old woman and directly made his way to planet Tianming. "My wounds are rather heavy. Xianming, the divine king of light, can help me recover even faster. Now that the concealment formation is gone, it's impossible for Xianming to come out. It's best if you send me into the tower," said the old woman. "Yes, Senior." Jianshin agreed straightforwardly and immediately took out the Inata tower. "My name is Su Ran. You must have learned about it from the two divine generals already. I don't put on such airs, and I still owe you a great favor because of the origin of ways, so there's no need for you to be so polite to me. You can just call me by my name. Remember, if you come across any danger outside, you have to contact me as soon as possible." Su Ran said one last thing before vanishing into the Inata tower. Afterwards, Jianshan controlled the small spaceship and shot through the vast cosmos in a straight line. He had already broken through with the laws of the sword, and his chaotic body could reach the 13th layer. However, he could come across various dangers at any time in outer space, so Jianshin needed to maintain a high level of vigilance at all times. As a result, he struggled to cultivate in peace. He could only postpone his breakthrough to the 13th layer of the chaotic body. After flying through outer space for 5 years in Jinshin's spaceship, Su Ran finally made a full recovery under the assistance of Xianming's Radiant Saint Force. After emerging from the Inata Tower, she no longer used the spaceship that was of a low grade and extremely limited speed. Instead, she used her cultivation as a primordial realm expert to move through outer space with Jianshin and Kea, who knows how many times faster than the small spaceship. Just like that, they finally arrived at their destination after another year of traveling, planet Tianming. Jianshin stared at the colossal planet as he stood outside it. He was deeply shocked. Just the diameter of the planet was billions of kilometers. If it was spread out, it would be no smaller than the cloud plane. There are a total of 81 great planets in the Saints' world. Planet Tianming ranks towards the bottom of the 81 great planets. However, no matter how low it ranks, there are still many peak organizations and clans above it. Even when I was at my peak condition, I couldn't fend them off. As a result, the two of you can't act recklessly on planet Tianming, Su Ran said to Jianshin and Kea sternly. Chapter 2252. An undetectable coldness immediately flashed through Jianshin's eyes when he heard about the heavenly demon religion again. He could still clearly remember how he and Kea had been hunted down by Huayan, one of the vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion. They had fled from the divine kingdom of Pingtian to the Blood Sun Empire in horrible shape. Back then, he was only equivalent to an overgod. He was basically powerless against Huayan, who had reached the primordial realm. If it were not for the divine king keeping Huayan busy for a while, he probably would not have been able to flee to the Blood Sun Empire. However, even with that being the case, the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan, still pursued him to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. If it were not for the primordial realm experts of the Blood Sun Empire who stopped Huayan, he and Kea probably would not have been able to board the spatial battleship and leave the cloud plane alive. It was possible to say that he had not wanted to leave his home. Instead, he had been forced by Huayan, the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion. He did not even have the chance to bid farewell to the Tianyuan family. As a result, he naturally felt extremely great hatred towards Huayan. I wonder if I'll have the power to kill Huayan once I break through to the 13th layer of the chaotic body, Jinshin thought. He could not help but clench his fists. He was rather eager to increase his strength. Senior Su ran, I want to stay on planet Tianming for a while. I need to enter seclusion immediately to increase my strength. I don't plan on leaving before I break through. Jinshin quickly made up his mind and said to Su Ran. After a moment of thought, Su Ran nodded. That works too. I just happen to need some time to cultivate as well. Although I've already recovered from my wounds, I still need quite some time to recover my lost cultivation and return to my peak condition. Afterwards, the three of them entered planet Tianming together. They planned on finding a city as a place to settle down, but when they passed by a divine kingdom, they saw the smoke of battle in the distance. Many Origin Realm and Godhood cultivators were engaged in a battle of life and death, causing rivers of blood to flow. High in the sky, powerful energy transformed into storms that wreaked havoc in the world. Several dozen Divine King were engaged in a fierce battle. It's the heavenly demon religion. Looking at the demonic aura that filled half the sky in the distance, Jian Shun, who had gone through the same battle, could tell with a single glance that one of the parties was the Empyrean demon cult. Jian Shun fell silent as he watched the soldiers fall one after another on the battlefield. He felt sorrow for the deaths of these people. He had understood long ago that the heavenly demon religion had not been waging wars in various places to expand their influence. Instead, they were gathering the essence, blood, and soul force of the fallen cultivators through repeated battles and condensing them into blood and soul force through powerful formations. Jinshin sighed inside and did not stay for long. He left the place. Before long, Jinshin's group stopped outside the imperial city of an ancient empire called Thousand Leaf. Not only is this city protected by powerful formations, but the origin energy here is also several times denser than the outside world. Let's settle down here, Su Ran said to Jinshin and Kea as she stood outside the majestic imperial city. But very soon, her expression became extremely strange. She stared at Jinshin deeply and said, "It's best if you disguise yourself." Disguise myself? Jinshin was surprised when he heard that. He stared at the city up ahead in thought and immediately began to disguise himself. Before long, he and Kea had completely changed their appearances. They concealed their presences and entered the city with Su Ran. As soon as he set foot in the city, Jinshin saw wanted posters everywhere. They also indicated his various characteristics, including what techniques he was skilled in, what laws he used, and so on. It's actually the solitary sword lineage that's wanted me. Jinshin's eyes narrowed when he saw the words solitary sword lineage at the bottom of the wanted posters. As long as we can find Jinshin, we can obtain tremendous wealth from the solitary sword ancestor, as well as a favor from the solitary sword ancestor. If we can directly capture Jinshin and hand him over to the solitary sword ancestor, we can even get the solitary sword ancestor to personally take action 3 times. TSK, TSK, TSK. I never thought that this young man called Jinshin would be so valuable. Through him, we can directly get a Grand Prime to take action 3 times. Moreover, this person is the solitary sword ancestor. The solitary sword ancestor is a renowned figure in the Saints world. Even among Grand Primes, he's an expert, Su Ran glanced at Jianshan mysteriously and sighed emotionally. Isn't that so? The solitary sword ancestor is a renowned peak expert in the saint's world. A single favor from him is enough to make many peak organizations like the Everlasting Empires very interested, let alone the fact that the solitary sword ancestor has taken action 3 times. Ever since the solitary sword ancestor issued the wanted posters for Jianshan several years ago, not only have many organizations searched everywhere for this person called Jianshan, but even many organizations from the other 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets have devoted quite a lot of effort to searching for Jianshan. They all want to get the solitary sword ancestor to take action 3 times. As soon as Su Ran finished speaking, people began to whisper among themselves nearby. It said that the solitary sword ancestor is a 5th heavenly layer Grand Prime. With his cultivation and strength, he would be the undisputed greatest expert on our planet, Jianshan said. Let alone the heavenly underworld planet. The solitary sword ancestor is an invincible existence even on the lower-ranking places of the 49 Great Plains. The discussions in the surroundings constantly rang out. Everyone discussed the solitary sword ancestor in great interest. Let's go. Let's find a place to stay first, Su Ran called out to Jianshan and did not stay for long. She turned around and left. After they had left, a curvaceous but extremely ugly woman stood before Jianshan's wanted posters. She stared at Jianshan's face closely as if she wanted to commit Jianshan's appearance to memory. In front of me is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Jianshan, although I have no grievances with you, I will definitely find you. As long as I find you, the solitary sword ancestor will owe me a favor, and I can use this favor to ask the solitary sword ancestor to take action and save Sister Qing Yishuan from the Gus family. The ugly woman clenched her fists tightly as determination filled her eyes. She swore inside, Sister Qing Yishuan, you have to wait for me. I will definitely find a way to save you. Jianshan, Kea, and Su Ran had already found an inn to stay in temporarily. After paying 3 years' worth of rent in one go, Jianshan directly returned to his room. He activated the formation and entered seclusion. Chapter 2253. Jianshan had accumulated a large number of cultivation resources from his trip to Poseidon Palace. Even though he had given many of them to his sister, he still had a lot left on him. For the sake of convenience, Jianshan categorized all the resources on him before placing them into a space ring. Once he was done, the first thing he did was take out the 2 god-tier heavenly resources from his space ring that he could not identify and gobble them down. The 2 heavenly resources were of extremely high quality. Jianshan had obtained them from the space ring of a Grand Prime in Poseidon Palace. There were a total of 5 of them. He gave 3 of them to Shui Yunlan so that she could give them to Changyang Mingwei. As soon as the heavenly resources entered his stomach, they turned into tremendous energy that spread through Jianshan's body. It was tough and brutal, forcefully causing Jianshan's body to swell up slightly. If it were any other divine king, they probably would have directly exploded from what Jianshan was experiencing right now. The energy from the 2 heavenly resources was just too tremendous. However, Jianshan's chaotic body was about to reach major achievement, so his body was extremely tough. As a result, the tremendous energy that filled his body posed no threat to him at all. Jianshan's dantian seemed to have become a whirlpool, constantly devouring the tremendous energy that filled his body. He circulated his cultivation method, and after a series of compression and purification, the energy was turned into strands of pure chaotic force, which were absorbed into the chaotic Niden in his dantian. It had to be mentioned that as Jianshan's chaotic force rapidly increased, breaking through layer after layer, his ability to refine and absorb energy had reached a whole new level as well. Before long, Jianshan had completely refined the 2 extremely high-quality heavenly resources. The terrifying energy within these 2 heavenly resources is only a 5th of what I need to break through to the 13th layer. It looks like the amount of energy I need to break through to the 13th layer will far exceed my expectations, Jianshan thought to himself. After refining the 2 heavenly resources, Jianshun slowly opened his eyes. After a moment of thought, he took out several dozen heavenly resources from the divine medicinal garden, as well as a mountainous pile of high and supreme grade divine crystals before continuing to cultivate. The saint's world had 49 great plains, and the Lone Heaven Plain was one of them. The Lonesome Heaven continent was also divided into 5 regions: north, south, east, west, and central. Within these 5 regions, there were also many divine kingdoms, as well as various great empires and other top factions. Even the Eternal Empires had as many as 3 in the Lonesome Heaven continent. However, the most frightening thing on the Lone Heaven Plain was not the 3 everlasting empires or the peak clans that stood at the apex of the plain. Instead, it was the renowned and authoritative 5 heavenly kings. The 5 heavenly kings each resided in a region. Their existences were the heavens of the Lone Heaven Plain. They were the kings of the 5 regions, existences that ruled over them. Even the 3 everlasting empires and the various peak organizations on the Lone Heaven Plain had to lower themselves before the 5 heavenly kings. They dared not show any disrespect at all. The Azure Pung King of the Azure Pung lineage was one of the 5 heavenly kings. He presided over the central region, using an azure mountain that hovered above the clouds as his territory. He called it the Azure Brilliance Mountain. In the saint's world, he was the famed Azure Pung King, but on the Lone Heaven Plain, he was the great heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. At this moment, an old man with disheveled hair knelt on the Azure Brilliance Mountain that hovered above the clouds in the central region of the Lone Heaven Plain. He pressed his head against the ground. "Master, this subordinate has come to beg for forgiveness," the old man said politely. "Song Ying, this king specially sent you to protect Mo Chung, but Mo Chung died in the end while you're still alive. What's the point of keeping someone like you who can't accomplish anything?" The Azure Pung King's dignified and cold voice rang out from the Azure Brilliance Mountain. There was also cold, killing intent within it. "This subordinate deserves death for failing to protect the young master. However, before I die, this subordinate has something important to report to master. There's actually something else about the young master's death," Song Ying said politely. "Speak." Afterwards, Song Ying reported everything that had happened in the Poseidon Palace to the Azure Pung King without hiding anything. He did not dare to lie before the Azure Pung King, because the Azure Pung King could instantly determine whether he was telling the truth or not. In other words, Mo Cheng's death is related to that person called Jinshin. The Azure Pung King's cold voice rang out. "Master, although the young master died to Jinshin's hands, this matter was still caused by Jinshin," said Song Ying. Back in the Neptunian Divine Palace, when the battle between the several hundred supreme god kings erupted, he fought against Ming Dong together with Mo Chung. His body was cleaved in half by Ming Dong's strike, and he was heavily injured, losing his battle prowess. However, he did not die in the battle. Instead, he was saved by a supreme divine king who was on good terms with the Azure Pung lineage in the chaotic battlefield. He was taken into a spatial artifact, and only recently did he recover slightly. He hurried back to the Lone Heaven Plain. "Jianshun," the Azure Pung King's cold voice rang out from the Azure Brilliance Mountain. The azure-robed Azure Pung King appeared silently at the top of the mountain. He stared at the sky coldly as heavy killing intent revolved around him. However, there was a smear of sickly paleness on his face. In the next moment, the Azure Pung King vanished. He had already used his extreme speed, charging out of the Lone Heaven Plain with unbelievable speed. He traveled millions of kilometers in a single instance, disappearing into the depths of outer space in the blink of an eye. A meteor hovered silently in the vast outer space, without moving at all. The solitary sword ancestor sat cross-legged on the meteor with his eyes closed. Killing intent coiled around him and did not disperse. He had already remained in outer space for several years, waiting for news from Jinshin. No matter where Jinshin had fled to, he would be able to rush over as quickly as he could as soon as his traces were exposed. At this moment, there was a flash of azure light. The Azure Pung King moved over from the depths of outer space with unparalleled speed, hovering outside the meteor where the solitary sword ancestor resided. My disciple's death is related to Jianshan. I can't do anything to the people of the heavenly palace of Bisheng right now, but Jianshan is someone I have to kill. Solitary sword ancestor, your way of divination is even greater than mine. Can't you divine Jianshan's whereabouts and end up waiting here bitterly? The Azure Pung King directly said to the solitary sword ancestor as soon as he arrived without excessive small talk. The solitary sword ancestor slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the pale-faced Azure Pung King calmly, clearly still injured. He said, "In the past few years, old man has divined the heavenly secrets more than once in an attempt to find Jianshan's whereabouts. But in the end, he found nothing. He couldn't find him at all. He's a mere divine king. Yet even old man can't divine anything about him. That can only mean three things. Firstly, there's an expert who's far more powerful than old man secretly protecting him, disrupting the heavenly secrets for him. Secondly, he's hidden in a special place that can obscure the heavenly secrets. That way, he can escape old man's search. Thirdly, this person's fate is extremely extraordinary. He's not restricted by the world, nor is he bound by the heavenly ways. The first possibility is unlikely, while the third possibility is complete nonsense. It's extremely likely that he's hiding in a special place that can obscure the heavenly secrets. I'd like to see just how long he can hide for." The Azure Pung King's face sank. He immediately took out a jade talisman and sent a message back to the Azure Brilliance Mountain on the Lone Heaven Plain. Immediately place a bounty on Jianshan across the entire Saints world. Investigate Jianshan's origins as quickly as possible. With the Azure Pung King's order, the entire Azure Brilliance Mountain immediately began to move. They passed on the Azure Pung King's order to the three everlasting empires and the various peak clans as quickly as possible. As soon as they learned that the order came from the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, one of the 5 heavenly kings of the Lone Heaven Plain, none of the peak organizations dared to tarry. They all spread the bounty as quickly as possible, covering the entire Lone Heaven Plain very soon. Afterwards, it spread out in all directions, reaching the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets. On the 20th of June, which is the 20th of this month, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet of 500 yuan for all of you. Xiaoyao will send this red packet to all of you as a password on the night of the 20th. Xiaoyao will tell all of you the password on his WeChat account. It's not a lot, but it's a small token of appreciation from Xiaoyao to repay all of you for your support over the years. At the same time, it's also a form of entertainment, so please don't complain. To those who haven't followed Xiaoyao's WeChat account, please do. Search for Xiaoyao's account, Xinxing Xiaoyao 110. Xinxing is Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a phone number for the police, where you can directly search for Xinxing Xiaoyao. Chapter 2254. A mere divine king was wanted by 2 famed grand primes. Not only did the bounty spread to the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets in the shortest amount of time possible, but they were also wanted by 2 renowned grand primes. At the same time, Jianshan naturally became a figure that many organizations of various sizes knew about. Even though everyone knew that searching for someone who wanted to hide in the vast Saints world was thousands of times more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack, the boundless grand primes were still a promise. However, the promise of 2 grand primes was extremely tempting to many organizations in the Saints world. This was because once they obtained the support of either one of the 2 experts, it would be enough for their organizations to rise in status. As a result, even though they knew it was like finding a needle in a haystack, many organizations still searched for Jianshan bitterly. Some organizations had even begun to investigate Jianshan's origins. However, this was not the only group searching for Jianshan in the Saints world. There were many peak organizations among them as well. As a matter of fact, there were a few peak organizations that were renowned even in the vast Saints world. These people were not searching for Jianshan for the bounty from the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Punk King. Instead, they just wanted to kill Jinshin. After all, Jinshin had killed a few divine kings in Poseidon Palace. Moreover, there were even more divine kings. Although they did not die to his hands, they were still related to him. As a result, more than half of the divine king seats have been emptied out. Quite a few of these divine kings were the future of some peak clans. They had been nurtured through countless resources. As a result, there were naturally many people who hated Jinshin to the core in the Saints world. Jinshin, who was still in seclusion, had no idea that he had already become an influential figure in the Saints world. He was currently charging towards the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Very soon, he had used up all the heavenly resources that could increase his cultivation, leaving behind some healing items. He had refined all the high-grade and supreme-grade divine crystals, turning them into strands of chaotic force within him. Now, he only had 1,500 five-color divine crystals and several tens of millions of fire divine crystals left in the Blue Poseidon Palace. His breakthrough was imminent, so Jinshin found it difficult to suppress his desire for greater strength. As a result, he no longer cared about wasting resources right now. He took out a large number of fire divine crystals without any hesitation and continued to cultivate. His chaotic body could refine all energy in the world. As a result, even though the fire divine crystals were filled with pure fire elemental energy, Jinshin did not sense them at all like supreme-grade divine crystals. The only difference was that the energy in the fire divine crystals was 2 or 3 times purer than supreme-grade divine crystals. Time passed silently. After who knew how long, Jinshin had absorbed over 10 million fire divine crystals. His body shuddered, and the chaotic Niden in his dantian finally shattered. Jinshin was already familiar with the process that followed. In just a few days, his chaotic force and chaotic body had completely transformed. The fist-sized chaotic Niden had shrunk to the size of a bean once again, but the chaotic force within it was many times more powerful than before. He had formally reached the 13th layer of the chaotic body. He had reached major achievement of the chaotic body. Even in the Immortals world, there were only a handful of people who had reached major achievement of the chaotic body. I never thought that breaking through to the 13th layer of the chaotic body would require such a terrifying amount of resources. Jinshin opened his eyes. There was no joy from breaking through on his face. Instead, he frowned. The amount of resources he had used to break through this time had far exceeded his expectations. Every time he broke through to the next layer of the chaotic body, he would require several times or even over a dozen times more resources than before. He could not help but worry about the resources he would need in the future. So I'll just have to take it one step at a time. Jinshin sighed gently. He dismissed his thoughts and left the room. The formations in Kea and Su Rant's rooms were tightly shut, so Jinshin did not disturb them. Instead, he left the inn by himself and went outside to investigate. Jinshin could hear people discussing him as he made his way through the wide, bustling streets. Portraits of him were plastered all over the streets, attracting many people's attention. The Azure Punk King is actually looking for me as well. Jinshin frowned. He had already learned that Mo Chang was dead from everyone's conversations, but Mo Chang's death had nothing to do with him. He had only come into conflict with Song Ying at most, so he really did not understand why the Azure Punk King wanted him. Whether it's the Azure Punk King or the Solitary Sword Ancestor, they're both renowned experts in the Saints world. They possess terrifying and heaven-defying techniques. The Saints world is vast, but it shouldn't be difficult for them to find a measly divine king. They just need to peer into his location slightly. It was only natural that they couldn't peer into my whereabouts when I was in the concealing formation before. However, I've already left the concealing formation, and just traveling through outer space took me several years. Coupled with the time I spent in seclusion this time, they should have found my location long ago if they really wanted to find me. However, they just haven't come. Instead, they're looking for me across the entire Saints world, mobilizing the power of many cultivators to find me. They're going through so much trouble and mobilizing so many people. There's only one explanation, and that's that even with the Azure Pung King and the solitary sword ancestor's abilities, they can't peer into my location, Jinshan thought. Instead, he let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, a slender woman stood before the counter in a store that specialized in heavenly resources near Jinshan. Logically speaking, a woman with such a figure would definitely have an extraordinary appearance. However, this woman with a devilish figure had an extremely ugly appearance. Her face was covered with sinister scars. "Shopkeeper, please take a look at this heavenly resource for me and see how many divine crystals it can be exchanged for." The woman took out an extremely crudely crafted wooden box from her spatial ring and opened it hesitantly. Immediately, a heart-wrenching fragrance wafted out. Just a single whiff was enough to reinvigorate people. Inside the roughly crafted wooden box, there was a purple peach lying quietly. This heavenly resource can increase a person's cultivation by 500 years, and the effects are gentle. There are no side effects at all. Even mortals won't suffer any harm from consuming it. It's extremely rare. "Shopkeeper, how much do you think it's worth?" the woman asked rather uneasily. Even though she knew that the peach was extraordinary, its grade was just too low. The moment the woman opened the wooden box, Jinshan, who was only a few kilometers away from the store on the same street, immediately shuddered. He stared ahead with shining eyes and shock filled his face. This is the presence of Xianhuang Qi. In the next moment, Jinshan had already vanished. He moved like a bolt of lightning, crossing several kilometers as quickly as he could, and silently arrived before the woman. What a peculiar aura. The shopkeeper of this shop was an old man who looked to be in his 70s. He sized up the peach without blinking and revealed a look of surprise. He secretly evaluated it in his heart. Slap! It was also at this moment that Jinshan struck out with lightning speed. He tightly covered the crude wooden box in the woman's hands, preventing the presence from leaking out any further. The wooden box ended up in Jinshan's hands as well. What are you doing? Are you trying to steal from me?" The woman stared at Jinshan, who had suddenly appeared beside her, in both shock and fear. She actually failed to react when Jinshan took the wooden box from her hands. This meant that this ordinary-looking stranger in front of her had a cultivation level that was far above hers. "Sir, the item in your hands was brought to us by this lady to sell. You've taken it without her permission. You've broken the rules of the Thousand-Leaf Empire in the imperial capital," the shopkeeper growled as he glared at Jinshan. "On the 20th of June, which is the 20th of this month, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet of 500 yuan for everyone. Xiaoyao will send this red packet to everyone on the night of the 20th as a red packet password. Xiaoyao will tell everyone the red packet password on WeChat's official account. It's not a lot, but it's a small token of appreciation from Xiaoyao in return for all the years of support. At the same time, it's also a form of entertainment, so I hope you won't complain. To those who have not followed Xiaoyao's official account, please do. Search for Xiaoyao's account, Xingxing Xiao 110, Xinxing Xiaoyao's pen name, as well as a police number, or just search for Xinxing Xiaoyao. Chapter 2255. Jinshan did not seem to hear what the two of them were saying. He gripped the rough wooden box with the violet peach tightly as his face became extremely stern. Even his hand, which was holding the wooden box, was trembling slightly at this moment. He could confirm with a single glance that the violet peach in the wooden box was the violet cloud peach he had left for his family in the lower world when he left the Tian-Yuan continent for the Saints' World. The violet peach in the wooden box was clearly a first-grade violet cloud peach. Even the crude wooden box that stored the violet cloud peaches had been personally crafted by him in the past. "Senior, please return it to me," the woman said again. She was filled with nervousness. The violet cloud peach was in Jinshan's hands, but she did not dare to take it from him. Jinshan finally returned to his senses. He suppressed his excitement and uneasiness as he glared at the woman. He growled, "Where did you get this?" Why should I tell you? This is mine. Please return it to me." The woman immediately became uneasy under Jinshan's glare. "Sir, this is the imperial capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire, and our Chui Shang spiritual herb store belongs to the Chui family. one of the three great organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. Don't tell me you want to use force in the Chui family's Chui Sheng spiritual medicine store? The shopkeeper's voice gradually turned cold as he studied Jianshan with narrowed eyes. Even though he could not tell Jianshan's cultivation and knew that Jianshan was a powerful expert, he remained fearless. The Chui family was one of the three great clans of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They were an existence that could stand on equal footing with the imperial family. With the Chui family behind them, there really was no one who dared to mess around in the Chui Sheng spiritual medicine store. Soon after, the shopkeeper looked at the ugly woman, and a trace of imperceptible disgust flashed in the depths of his eyes. He said in a righteous tone, "Miss, go and take out what belongs to you. The rules of the imperial capital are clear. In the imperial capital, there is only fair trade. There is no bullying or stealing. Otherwise, you'll be challenging the dignity of the Thousand Leaf Empire. You're looking down on the Thousand Leaf Empire." The shopkeeper clearly said the last part for Jianshan to hear. Jianshan ignored the shopkeeper's words. His gaze towards the ugly woman became sharper and sharper as a powerful pressure radiated from him. He said coldly, "Did you steal this? Tell me, where did you steal it from?" The ugly woman was only a god. Under Jianshan's pressure, she immediately paled. Her eyes were filled with fear. She said with a trembling voice, "And no, a younger sister of mine gave it to me. My younger sister didn't steal it. Yes. She said she brought it up from a lower world." Jianshan's face immediately eased up when he heard that. Afterwards, his gaze towards the ugly woman became slightly friendlier. He glanced at the shopkeeper who was glaring at him angrily and frowned slightly. He said to the woman, "If what you said is true, I probably have quite a deep relationship with the younger sister you speak of. It's inconvenient to talk here. Come with me. Let's go somewhere else." Jianshan returned the wooden box with the violet cloud peach to the ugly woman before turning around and making his way out. The Thousand Leaf Empire was only an ancient empire. He was not afraid that someone would steal the violet cloud peach from the ugly woman right under his nose in a place like this. Since it's her younger sister, there are only a few women who can reach the origin realm on the Tian Yuan continent. I wonder who has come to the Saint's world. Jianshan thought. He was rather eager to learn the identity of his old friend from the ugly woman. "Hold on, miss. Here are 100 high-grade divine crystals. Take care of them. The heavenly resource in your hand belongs to our Chui Sheng spiritual herb store from now on." The shopkeeper suddenly appeared beside the ugly woman and directly shoved a small pouch with 100 high-grade divine crystals into her hands. He then quickly extended his hand towards the wooden box. He had come into contact with various medicines for many years, so he had developed a pair of discerning eyes long ago. Even though he did not recognize the violet cloud peach, the wondrous presence that radiated from it allowed him to immediately determine that the heavenly resource was not as ordinary as it seemed on the surface. However, as soon as the shopkeeper extended his hand, another hand suddenly grabbed his wrist. Jianshan, who had already left the store, had suddenly appeared again and stopped the shopkeeper. "You want to buy a heavenly resource like this for a mere 100 high-grade divine crystals? You sure have your wishful thinking. I'm not selling this heavenly resource," Jianshan sneered. The fact that the violet cloud peaches contained Xianhuang Qi was no small matter. He could not reveal this in the Saint's world. The shopkeeper was furious. Just when he was about to complain, he could only swallow his words under Jianshan's sharp gaze. He dare not say anything. This was because the gaze made him shiver. He felt fear from the bottom of his heart. "Let's go." Jianshan did not stay for long. He called out to the woman and left the store. The ugly woman hesitated slightly before leaving with Jianshan in the end. Very soon, Jianshan brought the ugly woman to a remote place in the city. He looked at the woman deeply and asked, "What's the name of the person who gave you this?" The ugly woman looked at Jianshan and hesitated. She was uncertain about his relationship with her sister. If they were enemies, she would end up harming her sister. However, when she thought about her sister's current situation, she immediately made up her mind. She said, My sister is called Qing Yishuan. Do you really know her? Qing Yishuan. It's actually her. Jianxin was very surprised. He had never thought that the first familiar person he would come across in the Saints world would actually be Qing Yishuan. I never thought that Qing Yishuan would actually come to the Saints world as well. But it makes sense now that I think about it. Qing Yishuan's talent is quite good. She was able to reach the level of Holy Emperor even in the horrible environment of the Tian Yuan continent. Now that the origin energy of the Tian Yuan continent has gradually recovered and it's connected to the world of forsaken saints, the cultivation environment has improved drastically. With Qing Yishuan's talent, reaching the origin realm won't be difficult at all. Jianxin smiled faintly. He was filled with joy. To be able to reunite with an old friend in a foreign land was truly a joyous matter. The ugly woman finally confirmed that not only did the person before her know her sister from Jianxin's expression, but he was also not an enemy. She let out a sigh of relief. Where is Qing Yishuan right now? Jianxin asked. My sister's situation is not good. She's been taken away by the people of the Gus clan. She's in danger at any time. See, can you save my sister? The ugly woman stared at Jianxin closely as hope filled her face. But soon afterwards, she sighed in disappointment. She became gloomy. The Gus clan was one of the 3 peak organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They possessed a primordial realm expert and stood on equal footing with the imperial family. They were extremely powerful. Qing Yishuan was a woman who had only come up from a lower world recently. Even if she had some friends in the Saints world, how powerful could her friends be with her cultivation? What did you say? Qing Yishuan's been taken away. Jianxin's smile vanished, and his face immediately sank. On the 20th of June, which is the 20th of this month, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet of 500 yuan for our brothers. Xiaoyao will send this red packet to everyone on the night of the 20th as a red packet password. Xiaoyao will tell everyone the red packet password on his official WeChat account. Although it's not a lot, it's a small token of appreciation from Xiaoyao. He wants to repay our brothers for their support over the years. At the same time, it's a form of entertainment, so I hope you won't complain. To the brothers who have not followed Xiaoyao's official WeChat account, please do. Search for Xiaoyao's account, Xingxingxiao110. Xinxing is Xiaoyao's pen name, as well as a police number, where you can directly search for Xinxing Xiaoyao. Chapter 2256. Just who did Qing Yishuan offend? Why was she taken away by the people of the Gus clan? And how did you get to know Qing Yishuan? Jianxin asked sternly. My sister is only at the origin realm. After coming to the Saints world, where did she dare to offend anyone? Even when she came across deities, she avoided them. She was taken away by the people of the Gus clan because they had taken a liking to her beauty and bearing. As for how I got to know Sister Qing Yishuan, it all started several decades ago. Back then, I was heavily injured and on the brink of death. It was Sister Qing Yishuan who used heavenly resources to save me, so she became my savior. After spending some time together, I discovered that Sister Qing Yishuan and I hit it off very well, so we began to refer to each other as sisters, the ugly woman said before sighing softly. Soon after, she sighed gently. Sorrow and self-blame filled her face. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have brought my sister here. I should have known that the first young master of the Gus clan was a lecher. Who knows how many women have been harmed by him? It's all my fault. It's all because of me. The ugly woman was filled with regret. How long has Qing Yishuan been taken away? Jianxin asked with a pale face. Qing Yishuan was someone from his hometown, and they had met in the past. He could not allow anything to happen to her in the Saints world. My sister was taken away by the people of the Gus clan 5 years ago. What? It's already been 5 years? Jianxin's face changed. 5 years was just the blink of an eye for someone in seclusion, but it was enough for many things to happen with Qing Yishuan's current situation. The ugly woman seemed to know what Jianxin was worried about. She explained, the people who took Qing Yishuan away were the personal guards of the first young master of the Gus clan. These personal guards served the young master of the Gus family. They would often capture some women with extraordinary auras, weak powers, and no strong background, and offer them to their master for him to enjoy. However, There were rumors recently that the first young master of the Gus clan had already been in seclusion for over a decade. He was about to break through to Overgod. Therefore, for now, little sister Qing Yishuan is still very safe. Jianchen finally let out a sigh of relief when he heard that. It was fine as long as Qing Yishuan was fine. As long as she was fine, he would do everything he could to save her. Sigh, if only we could find Jianchen. It's a pity that the saint's world is so vast. Who knows where Jianchen is hiding? Finding him is almost impossible. The ugly woman sighed gently. Clearly, she was unable to find a solution to Qing Yishuan's predicament. After all, she was only a mid-heavenly god. Why are you looking for Jianchen? Jianchen stared at the woman with a strange expression. He had already changed his appearance long ago, hiding his original appearance. He was not afraid of being recognized at all, unless their cultivation surpassed his by far too much. The ugly woman glared at Jianchen like she was looking at an idiot. She said in an exasperated manner, I'm obviously looking for Jianchen to obtain the assistance of the solitary sword ancestor. What kind of figure is the solitary sword ancestor? Although I've never heard of him in the past, there have been many rumors about him recently. He's a legendary Grand Prime. I heard that even the Lord of Planet Tianming can't afford to provoke him. If he's willing to appear, the Gus clan won't be able to say anything no matter how bold they are. Jianchen stared at the woman deeply and said after some thought, Tell me the location of the Gus clan. I'll think of a way to save Qing Yishuan. At this moment, a long whistle suddenly rang out from the distance. It was a long and drawn-out voice, basically echoing through the entire royal capital. It alarmed countless people in the city. It's the first young master of the Gus clan. He's actually broken through to Overgod successfully. The first young master of the Gus clan really does possess extraordinary talent. It's only been around 50,000 years since he started cultivating, yet he's already become an Overgod. He went from a mortal to an Overgod in 50,000 years. Although this speed can't be compared to the supreme prodigies who can shake up the saint's world, he's still a prodigy in the Thousand-Leaf Empire. Afterwards, discussions rang out everywhere in the royal capital. Many people praised the first young master of the Gus clan as soon as they mentioned him. It's over, it's over. We're in big trouble now. The young master of the Gus family broke through so quickly. My sister is in danger. What should we do? The ugly woman's face was filled with panic. Don't worry. Jianchen looked in the direction of the whistle. He had already confirmed the location of the Gus clan, so he returned to the inn he stayed in temporarily as quickly as he could. Before long, Jianchen walked out of the inn with a fan in his hand. He wore luxurious white robes, and a black-clothed, cold-looking man followed him closely. Vaguely, a powerful presence radiated from the black-clothed man. Hey, do you remember what I told you? Do you know what you should do? Jianchen walked at the front with his fan as he asked the black-clothed man who had taken a step behind him. Yes, young master, I know what to do. Heya, who was following closely behind, said respectfully. Sigh, it's a pity that there are bounties for me everywhere. Even the sword techniques I specialize in, the methods of battle, the laws I comprehend, and the treasures I use have all been clearly marked out, so I can't do anything. Otherwise, why would it be so troublesome? Jianchen waved his fan as he walked at the front with a swagger. He seemed like the young master of an aristocratic clan, but he was filled with helplessness inside. Before long, he arrived near the Gus clan with Heya. At this moment, the entrance of the Gus clan had already been filled with people who had come with great gifts to congratulate the first young master of the Gus clan on breaking through to Overgod. The Gus clan was one of the 3 peak clans in the Thousand-Leaf Empire. They stood on equal footing with the imperial family, and they were extremely powerful. Let alone the Thousand-Leaf Empire. Even in the neighboring ancient empires, there were not many organizations that dared to not show respect to the Gus clan. There were countless people who tried to curry favor with them. Even though quite a lot of people had gathered outside the entrance of the Gus clan, there was no chaos or ruckus. All the people who had come to congratulate them lined up in an orderly manner and stepped through the entrance with smiles on their faces. Everything was in order. Among them, There were even quite a few people who gave their congratulations. When they stepped through the door of the Gus clan, they all took out some valuable items to bribe the guards in a friendly manner. Just the guards received quite a lot of benefits. This was the power and status of a clan that possessed a primordial realm expert. However, at this moment, two people who didn't follow the rules appeared. Not only did they not follow the rules and line up properly like the others who came to congratulate them, but they even walked past the crowd and headed straight for the entrance of the Gus family without a care in the world. The two of you, please wait. Please state your identities and the purpose of your visit. The two of them were naturally stopped by the guards. An over-god who seemed to be the leader called out emotionlessly. How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to my young master like that? Kneel down and apologize. The black-robed man, who was a step behind, immediately snorted coldly. A powerful presence radiated from him, pressing down on the leader of the guards mercilessly. The leader of the guards immediately paled, and with a plop, he actually could not endure the pressure. His knees bent uncontrollably, and he knelt on the ground heavily, shattering his knees. The peak of the Divine King. This person is actually a peak expert of the Divine King. Just what kind of powerful organization does this young man come from to have a peak expert of the Divine King as a guard? The peak of the Divine King is a peak expert in the Thousand Leaf Empire. His status is extremely great. Yet now, this peak expert of the Divine King is only a guard. The hearts of the many people who had gathered here to congratulate him were greatly shaken. They all stared at the black-clothed man with shocked faces. Huge waves surged in their hearts, and they were extremely restless. Chapter 2257. The entrance of the Gus clan fell silent at that moment. Everyone stared at the disguised Jinshin and Heya. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. To be able to have a peak Divine King as his guard, this person was definitely not someone they could afford to offend. Jinshin fanned himself gently as he glanced at the kneeling over-god arrogantly. He raised his hand slightly and indicated for Heya to erase his presence. Only then did he say indifferently, "Is this how your Gus clan welcomes guests?" "Ha ha, I didn't know esteemed guests had arrived, so please forgive me for not welcoming you." At this moment, an old voice rang out from the Gus clan with bold laughter. A white-robed old man strode over with a ruddy face. He clasped his fist towards Jinshin from afar and was extremely polite. Behind the old man were over a dozen members of the upper echelon of various ages. They all hurried over as they stared at Jinshin. Jinshin glanced past them indifferently and saw through their strength. The old man at the front was a late Divine King, while the people behind him were all Divine King. Most of them were early Divine King, and there were only 3 mid-Divine King experts. As for late God Kings, including the old man at the very front, there were only 2 of them. I am Gu Yuan, the current patriarch of the Gus clan. I represent the entire clan in welcoming this young master to our Gus clan. Gu Yuan chuckled. He glanced at Heya, who stood beside Jinshin, and his eyes narrowed by an undetectable amount. He treated Jinshin with even more caution. Afterwards, he yelled at the leader of the guards, "Nati, how can you be so rude? Why don't you apologize to this young master?" At this time, the guard leader named Nati knew that the person in front of him was not someone he could provoke. Let alone him, even the Gus clan behind him probably would not dare to provoke him. Without any hesitation, he immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Jinshin, begging for mercy in a remorseful manner. Jinshin did not even glance at Nati. He fanned himself gently as he studied the interior of the Gus clan very casually. He was haughty and condescending as he said indifferently, "I'm not a narrow-minded person. You can rise. I won't pursue your disrespect before, but there won't be a next time." Nati felt like he had been pardoned, so he thanked Jinshin politely in a hurry. Nati felt fear towards Jinshin from having a peak Divine King as a guard. Just how great was his background for a peak Divine King expert to treat him as a guard? At the very least, every single Divine King, even early Divine King experts, was treasured by the Gus clan. They possessed extremely great statuses, so they would never be treated as guards. "Ha! Your visit to our Gus clan has truly brought light to our humble dwelling. Please come in, young master. The patriarch of the Gus clan, Gu Yuan, greeted Jinshin warmly. He spoke carefully, afraid that he would offend the young master in some way. All the guests had been escorted out by Gu Yuan in the hall of the Gus clan. The upper echelon of the clan gathered together and received Jinshin with the highest level of courtesy. Jinshin sat on a chair very casually in the hall. He was natural and did not act overcautious at all. He stood behind Jinshin emotionlessly like a loyal guard. His heavy presence that belonged to a peak divine king slightly revolved around him, causing the early and mid-divine king experts in the hall to feel very pressured. They all became extremely unnatural. Gu Yuan introduced all the upper echelon of the Gus clan to Jinshin before clasping his hands at Jinshin and asking, "May I ask how I should address you, young master?" "I'm Changyang." Jinshin smiled. "So it's young master Changyang. Do you come from the central region of planet Tianming, young master Changyang?" Gu Yuan clasped his hands with a smile. However, he thought hard inside about which peak organization on planet Tianming had a surname related to Changyang. Jinshin purposefully acted arrogantly. He gently sipped on the tea brewed from precious heavenly resources and said, "I'm not from planet Tianming. I've come out with a senior in my clan this time, and when I passed by planet Tianming, my senior wanted to visit an old friend, so he made a short stop on planet Tianming. I've always liked freedom, and I like to go to various places to see the different cultures and customs, so I didn't go with my senior. Instead, I wandered around planet Tianming by myself. Young Master Changyang is an extraordinary person with an impressive appearance. You can tell with a single glance that you're extraordinary. You don't even have to think about it. You're definitely a peak expert who has reached the pinnacle of cultivation," Gu Yuan said casually, trying to probe Jinshin's background in an indirect manner. Jinshin acted like he did not know anything. He said seriously, "That senior of mine only broke through to chaotic prime several million years ago. That's only average in the clan. How can it be regarded as great accomplishments?" Gu Yuan's hand trembled violently when he heard that. The teacup in his hand almost fell to the ground as shock filled his eyes. The divine kings of the Gus clan who accompanied him in the hall were also shocked. Afterwards, their gazes towards Jinshin all became respectful and filled with deep fear. "Let's go. Patriarch Gu Yuan, let's go out for a stroll. Take this young master on a proper tour of your place." Jinshin suddenly stood up and directly made his way outside. He acted like he was free to do whatever he wanted. He did not consider whether it was convenient for the master of this place. However, in the eyes of Gu Yuan and the others, Jinshin's actions suited Jinshin's identity even more. As for why Jinshin, the young master of a peak organization, would suddenly become interested in their tiny Gus clan, they clearly did not care about that anymore. They had been completely stunned by the chaotic prime senior that Jinshin had mentioned. All they could think about right now was how they had to properly entertain this young master and use this opportunity to befriend him. "Young Master Changyang, this way, please." Gu Yuan immediately led the way for Jinshin with the members of the upper echelon. His attitude became even more humble as he tried to please him along the way. Under the accompaniment of Gu Yuan and the others, Jinshin strolled through the Gus clan leisurely. On the surface, he seemed like he was admiring the beauty of the world, but in reality, he was secretly worried. The Gus clan was an ancient clan with a primordial realm expert, after all. There were formations and barriers everywhere, preventing him from probing with the senses of his soul. As a result, he had no idea where Qing Yishuan was imprisoned. As a matter of fact, he did not even know whether Qing Yishuan was really imprisoned in the Gus clan. It was a pity that he could not openly ask about Qing Yishuan. After all, he was playing the role of the young master of a large organization. Once he asked about a receival cultivator, he would make many mistakes and lead to many unexplainable problems. "Young Master Changyang, this is where the servants live. I don't think there's a need to go there, just in case you dirty your feet," Gu Yuan said carefully as he passed through the barrier. Gu Yuan cautiously said when they were about to pass through a barrier. His expression was somewhat unnatural. This was because he had specially allocated this region to the first young master of the Gus clan, and the first young master was extremely lecherous. As a result, some shameful things would often happen in there. These matters were obviously trivial matters in Gu Yuan's eyes. However, if young Master Chang Yang, who possessed a frightening background, saw them, it would have a bad influence on him. However, Jianshan ignored him. He remained arrogant as he waved his fan and strolled forward leisurely, directly passing through the barrier. Gu Yuan did not dare stop him at all. All he could do was sigh inside and pray that nothing unsightly would happen in there. Afterwards, he followed Jianshan in reluctantly. "Let go of me. If you touch me again, I'll immediately blow myself up." As soon as he passed through the barrier, a furious woman's voice rang out from afar. Jinshan's face sank when he heard the familiar voice. A powerful killing intent flashed through his eyes. This was because it was Qing Yishuan's voice. P.S. At 8 in the evening on the 20th, which is 8 in the evening, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packets on his official WeChat account. Please pay attention to the information on the account. Since Alipay could only give out 300 yuan at a time, the 500 yuan red packets that Xiaoyao had prepared for his brothers would generate 2 passwords. The first password would be 300 yuan, while the second password would be 200 yuan. Although the amounts of the 2 passwords were different, the average amount would be the same based on the number of people. Please follow Xiaoyao's official WeChat account if you want to take part in this activity, and do not follow Xiaoyao's official account. The official account was Xinxing Xiaoyao 110. Xinxing was Xiaoyao's pseudonym with a phone number for the police or a direct search for the pseudonym. Chapter 2258. The patriarch of the Gus clan, Gu Yuan, cursed inside when he heard the voice. He felt his head hurt. Although he did not know who the woman was, he knew his son's character extremely well. He did not even need to think to know that the woman definitely had something to do with his son. If it were any other time, he would not have bothered with such a small matter. However, if young Master Chang Yang, who possessed a frightening status, saw this right now, he would not be able to avoid leaving a bad impression on him. Naturally, Gu Yuan did not wish to see this happen. After all, he wanted to use this opportunity to befriend this young Master Chang Yang. Young Master Chang Yang. It's probably because of some conflict between the servants. Young Master Chang Yang, your status is great, so it's not suitable for you to stay where the servants live. Let's go elsewhere, Gu Yuan said from one side. However, as soon as Gu Yuan's voice sounded, a voice that was filled with lust was transmitted over. Ha ha ha, blow yourself up? You're just a mere returnant's cultivator, yet you want to blow yourself up before me? Aren't you looking down on me a little too much? TSK, TSK, TSK. This woman sure is nice. Not only is she beautiful, but she also possesses an otherworldly bearing. Most importantly, she possesses the presence that only experts possess. It's said that you came up from a lower world. In other words, you were once a sovereign of a lower world. You were an existence that stood above countless people and controlled the fate of all. I just like women like that. Conquering a former sovereign of a lower world seems to be a very wonderful feeling. Gu Yuan's face became ugly when he heard the voice. Jianshan folded his fan and directly made his way to the hall where the voice had come from. When he approached the door, Heya directly pushed it open with a flash. Jianshan strode in. As soon as he entered the hall, he saw a beautiful woman with an extraordinary bearing standing there with a pale face. She glared ahead with an extremely sharp gaze. On her face, there was not the slightest trace of fear. There was only a bone-deep hatred and an intense killing intent. Jinshan's gaze froze on the woman. She also wore azure clothes and had a familiar appearance. Was she not Qing Yishuan, whom he had met in the Sea Realm before? Seeing how Qing Yishuan was unscathed for now, Jinshan finally stopped worrying. "Who are you? Who let you in?" At this moment, a man's voice rang out. A rather handsome young man stood near Qing Yishuan. His perverted smile quickly vanished when Jianshan suddenly barged in. He glared at Jianshan with a sunken face. "Don't be rude." Gu Yuan walked in from outside with an ugly expression. He glared at the young man with a sullen face. "Father, why have you come?" Gu Yuan's arrival immediately caused the young man to be startled. He knew in his heart that this father of his would never come to this place. "This is young Master Changyang. Why don't you greet him?" Gu Yuan called out to the young man before politely saying to Jianshin, "Young Master Changyang, this is my good-for-nothing son, Gu Feng." Gu Feng was not stupid. He could tell from his father's expression that this young Master Changyang probably possessed quite the background. He immediately suppressed his displeasure and glanced at Jianshin in surprise and doubt. He immediately clasped his hands and bowed towards Jianshin. "That's strange. The region I live in is rather remote in the clan. Why has this young Master Changyang, who even father treats well, come to such a remote place?" Gu Feng was very confused. What a unique woman." Jianshin ignored Gu Feng. He looked at Qing Yishuan, and his eyes immediately lit up. He waved his fan as he circled around Qing Yishuan. He studied her in great interest and praised. "She's stubborn and has an unyielding spirit. Most importantly, I can actually see a unique bearing that only peak experts possess on her. Yep, this woman does have the right to be my servant and serve me." Gu Feng's face immediately changed with that. Just when he was about to say something, Gu Yuan's chuckling voice rang out. "It's her fortune to be valued by young Master Changyang. Since young Master Changyang likes her, I'll make the decision and gift this beautiful woman to young Master Changyang." "Father," Gu Feng said. His face was ugly and filled with reluctance. However, he forcefully swallowed his words after receiving a glare from Gu Yuan. At this moment, Qing Yishuan suddenly looked at Jianshin. She said coldly, "If it's just being your servant, I can stay by your side, but you have to promise me that you won't do anything to me." As Jianshin had already disguised himself, hiding his original appearance and even concealing his presence, Qing Yishuan failed to recognize him at all. Jianshin smiled disdainfully. He gently lifted Qing Yishuan's chin with his fan and smiled gently. "This is the saint's world, not the lower world where you once reigned supreme. What right do you have to negotiate with me as a puny origin realm cultivator?" Qing Yishuan's face darkened when she heard that, but she still said stubbornly, "If you don't agree, then I'll refuse even before I die." "Refuse even before you die?" Jianshin seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. He chuckled. "Before me, it'll be difficult for a puny origin realm cultivator like you to even die. You don't have a choice." At this moment, He took a step forward and placed his finger on Qing Yishuan's back, controlling her with ease. Afterwards, he followed behind Jianshan with Qing Yishuan and swaggered off. The patriarch of the Gus clan did not dare to say anything. Instead, he smiled and bowed to one side, afraid that he would be negligent at all. Now that he had achieved his objective, Jianshan did not want to stay any longer. Before long, he bid farewell to Gu Yuan and left the Gus clan with Qing Yishuan. "Father, did you find that young Master Changyang is rather strange? From what you said, I feel like young Master Changyang has specially come for this woman." The young master of the Gus clan, Gu Feng, said in doubt after Jianshan left. "That's right. Patriarch, I feel the same way." A divine king of the Gus clan added. The patriarch of the Gus clan, Gu Yuan, stared in the direction that Jianshan had vanished in. After a moment of thought, he said, "It is a little strange, but there are two things that I'm certain about at the very least. The first is that young Master Changyang is not simple at all. I secretly used a secret technique, but I was actually unable to see through his exact strength. I can tell from that young Master Changyang is anything but simple. The second point is that the guard beside him is indeed a peak divine king. His cultivation is even slightly greater than mine and the Grand Elders. However, an expert like that showed respect before young Master Changyang. Moreover, this respect came from the bottom of his heart. He truly treated him as a servant, as if he was not faking it at all. What does that mean? Perhaps young Master Changyang is rather eager to enjoy this woman with extraordinary bearing after seeing her, which is why he left in a hurry. A peak divine king sniggered. At the same time, in the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire, the Blood Battle clan, that was one of the three peak organizations, just like the Gus clan, a deep voice rang out from a secret room that was enveloped by layers of formations deep underground. Ancestor, we've just received news that a young master suspected to be from a peak clan has suddenly appeared in the Imperial capital and has paid a visit to the Gus clan. What does this have to do with our Blood Battle clan? The Ancestor's cold voice rang out from the secret room. Ancestor, our Blood Battle clan is on par with the Gus clan in strength. It's basically impossible for our Blood Battle clan to wipe out the Gus clan with our strength alone. However, I believe that our chance to wipe out the Gus clan has arrived. You want our Blood Battle clan to rope in a young master with a great organization behind him? The Ancestor asked. Chapter 2259. It won't be easy to shift the blame onto the Gus clan. How confident are you? The Ancestor of the Blood Battle clan asked in the secret room. Although their Bloody Battle clan was one of the three peak factions of the Thousand Leaf Empire along with the Gus clan, these three peak factions did not get along well with each other. It could be said that they constantly fought both openly and covertly. This was especially the case for the Bloody Battle clan and the Gus clan. They had formed a blood feud many years ago. However, the two clans were on par with each other in strength, so neither of them were confident in wiping out the other. As a result, neither of them dared to start an all-out war, as they were afraid that they would suffer losses in the war and allow others to benefit from it. However, once they found an opportunity to wipe out the other side in a single stroke, they would not give up on it so easily. That young master has already made a trip to the Gus family. This is a very good opportunity. Meanwhile, our Blood Battle clan has been secretly preparing for many years. As long as we operate properly, I'm more than 90% confident that the Gus clan will become the scapegoat, said the person standing outside the secret room. He was filled with confidence, as if victory was already in his grasp. Rumble. A muffled sound was heard, and the tightly shut door of the secret room slowly opened. A biting, cold, murderous aura spread out from within like an avalanche, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet. A middle-aged man with a resolute face and waist-length hair slowly walked out of the secret room. He wore a red suit that looked like it was dyed in blood, giving off a bloody feeling. A heavy and powerful presence revolved around him. It had completely surpassed the limits of the Divine King. He had reached an even higher level, the primordial realm. You really haven't disappointed me after I handed all the important matters of the clan to you. Go arrange it quickly. Remember, you can't make any mistakes. You have to make sure nothing goes wrong. You can't let the clan fall into eternal damnation. As for the young master, I'll deal with him personally, the Ancestor of the Blood Battle clan said sternly. Yes, Ancestor. I'll go arrange it right away. The person backed off. The Ancestor of the Blood Battle clan stood outside the secret room. His gaze became extremely deep as he murmured, "This matter will be very risky, but if you want the Gus clan to be destroyed, you have to take the risk." Jianshan fanned himself in the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire as he strolled leisurely through the streets. Qin Yishuan and Heya followed closely behind him. Black Crow, on the other hand, was expressionless as he followed Jianshan in a natural manner. He truly treated himself as a guard and a servant. After all, he had already submitted to Jianshan when they were at the Azure Poseidon Palace. On the other hand, Qin Yishuan gritted her teeth as she followed behind Jianshan with a face filled with unwillingness and humiliation. A sliver of despair gradually appeared in her heart. Although she had left the Gus clan and escaped from the first young master of the Gus clan, in her opinion, ending up in the hands of this young master was no different from ending up in the hands of the first young master of the Gus clan. This young Master Changyang, who even the Gus clan did not dare to provoke, had still taken a liking to her beauty. He was basically the same as the first young master of the Gus clan. At this moment, Jianshan suddenly turned around. He stared at Qin Yishuan and said, "You were taken away by the people of the Gus clan. If I hadn't appeared in time, you probably would have been tainted by Gu Feng already. Do you want revenge? Do you want to personally kill Gu Feng and the guard of the Gus clan who took you away?" Qin Yishuan glared at Jianshan coldly and said coldly, If you want to use my body as a condition, I don't need your help. Hee hee, you sure are stubborn. Jianchun smiled without minding at all. This is the saint's world, not the lower world you stayed in before. You need to adapt to the rules of survival here and reconsider your identity, or it'll be very difficult for you to survive. Qing Yishuan listened silently from behind. She gritted her teeth and remained silent. Suddenly, Qing Yishuan froze. She came to a halt and remained where she was. She stared ahead without blinking. A warrant for Jianchun's arrest was posted there in an extremely eye-catching manner. Many people stopped around the warrant, pointing at Jianchun's portrait as they discussed. It's actually Jianchun. Qing Yishuan's heart was in turmoil as she stared at the familiar face and familiar name. Her heart churned. The saint's world was so vast. She had never thought that she would receive news of Jianchun so soon. Even though it was only a warrant, Qing Yishuan knew that Jianchun was still alive at the very least. Not only was he alive, but he had even caused a huge mess. I never thought that he would actually become the Divine King, and that even the Supreme Divine King would die to his hands. Qing Yishuan's feelings became extremely mixed when she saw the accomplishments she envied on the warrant. Vaguely, she seemed to see the scene of the brat who could not even withstand a single strike from her in the Sea Realm, taking away the 8 Wastelands diagram fragment from her. Back then, Jianchun's strength was not enough to catch her attention. He was extremely weak. But now, he had become a supreme divine king in her eyes, while she was only at the origin realm. Qing Yishuan stared at Jianchun's warrant silently. In the end, she sighed inside and left gloomily. Jianchun, although I want to help you, I can't even protect myself right now, so you can only rely on yourself. I hope you can live on well, Qing Yishuan thought. We won't be staying on planet Tianming for long. Do you have any unfinished business here? At this moment, Jianchun's voice rang out. Qing Yishuan hesitated when she heard that. She gently bit her lip and said softly, I still have a sister I've met not too long ago. I want to bid farewell to her. Go. Heya, follow her and ensure her safety. Also, give a portion of your divine crystals to her sister, Jianchun said to Heya. Obviously, he knew that the sister Qing Yishuan mentioned was actually the ugly woman. Yes, Heya replied before leaving with Qing Yishuan. After the two of them left, Jianchun immediately dismissed his frivolous attitude. He gradually became stern. He raised his head to look at the sky, and a cold light flashed through his eyes. He immediately flew out of the city. He had sensed long ago that not only was he being followed, but there was also a pair of invisible eyes that would linger on him from time to time. Whenever the invisible eyes stared at him, Jianchun would feel slightly threatened. Chapter 2260. Although I don't know who's targeting me, it means that the primordial realm expert who's targeting me isn't particularly powerful, since I can sense it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sensed it, Jianchun thought. After reaching the 13th layer of the chaotic body, not only had his battle prowess increased, but his various abilities had also increased by quite a lot. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to sense a primordial realm expert spying on him secretly. When I reached the 12th layer of the chaotic body, my battle prowess was already greater than most of the Supreme Divine King. Now that my chaotic body is breaking through, I wonder what level my battle prowess has reached and whether I have the right to become the strongest Divine King. It's said that the experts who rank in the top 10 of the Divine King possess the right to fend off primordial realm experts or even kill them. I wonder if I have the right to kill primordial realm experts now. I desperately need a primordial realm expert to test my current strength. Then, I'll let the primordial realm expert who's spying on me test my true battle prowess. Although I'll face the risk of being exposed, I don't plan on staying on planet Tianming for long. Jianchun left the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire. His expression remained the same as before as he flew into the distance at a steady pace. However, even with that being the case, his speed was extremely shocking. Before long, he was 1,000,000 kilometers away from the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire. However, the primordial realm expert who was spying on him did not appear at that distance. However, Jianshan could clearly sense that the primordial realm expert had always been spying on him. However, he hid very well, so it was very difficult for him to find him with Jianshan's current strength. In order to avoid alerting him, Jianshan did not show any abnormalities along the way, nor did he dare to use his soul to search. Has the person spying on me discovered my identity, or is it because of some other reason? Jianshan's heart was filled with doubts. This was a very important matter that concerned his own safety and his future path. He had to figure it out. When Jianshan was 2 million kilometers away from the imperial city, the space around him suddenly began to twist violently. The mountains and rivers in his vision vanished, replaced by a desolate world. Jianshan's flying figure came to an abrupt halt. He sized up this desolate world, and his expression turned serious. He could tell with a single glance that this was a miniature world independent from the saint's world. He had been sucked into a miniature world without noticing anything. He was familiar with miniature worlds because there were quite a few of them on the Tianyuan continent. The 10 protector clans all resided in miniature worlds created by the Holy Emperor. However, there were strong and weak mini-worlds as well. The weaker mini-worlds could be destroyed by a battle between Saint Realm cultivators. Clearly, the miniature world he had entered was of a high level. The space there was extremely stable, enough to endure the shockwaves of battles between infinite primes. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy appeared, causing the space of the miniature world to ripple like water. Energy surged in the sky like a tsunami, condensing into a thick finger in a single moment. It suddenly fell towards Jianshan with the power of slaughter. The power of this finger was incomparably great. It really had the power to destroy the world. As the finger fell, the space of the entire miniature world twisted and blurred. Jianshan's heart sank. The primordial realm expert he had encountered was definitely not a regular primordial realm expert. Instead, he comprehended one of the most offensive laws out of the 3,000 laws, the laws of slaughter. His battle prowess surpassed most experts of the same level. Moreover, his opponent struck out extremely decisively. He did not say anything at all, using his full strength right from the start. Killing intent surged. Clearly, he wanted to kill Jianshan cleanly. Jianshan bellowed out at the sky and immediately counterattacked. His presence rapidly soared as the power of the laws of the sword condensed around him, turning into a huge strand of sword chi that collided with the descending finger. Jianshan did not use his full strength with this strike. In reality, he did not even use 50% of his strength. He only used battle prowess equivalent to the Divine King's top 100. Boom! With a thud, Jianshan fell from the sky like a kite with a short string. He slammed into the ground heavily as his face paled. Blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. He seemed like he was heavily injured as he struggled to stand up from the ground. Who are you? Why did you suddenly launch a sneak attack against me? Jianshan stared at the sky and asked furiously. Who I am is no longer important. What's important is that you won't be able to leave here alive today, young Master Changyang. A cold voice rang out from the sky. A gleam of light flashed through Jianshan's eyes. He understood that his identity had not been exposed when he was referred to as young Master Changyang, which made him feel relieved. However, his expression did not change at all. He called out sternly, "Since you know my name, you must know my origins as well. Are you so confident that you can kill me? However, what I don't understand is that I have no enemies on planet Tianming. So why do you want to kill me? Since you want to know, I'll let you die a little clearer. This small world of mine is not an ordinary small world. Once you fall into this place, regardless of how many escaping secret techniques you possess, they will be useless in this place. Even if you possess a top-tier escaping treasure, you will not have the chance to use it in front of me. Hence, it will be difficult for you to escape today. As for why I want to kill you, it's obviously to shift the blame to the Gus clan. As long as you're dead, we'll be able to lead this matter to the Gus clan very well with our secret operations. We'll be able to make the Gus clan face destruction. I know your background is extraordinary. You have even more powerful peak experts behind you who can peer into the heavenly secrets. However, you can give up. Since I'm bold enough to attack you, I naturally have complete confidence in erasing all traces so that those peak experts won't be able to find anything. You already know what you need to know. Young Master Changyang, it's time to send you on your way. With that, overwhelming energy gathered once again. Strands of power of slaughter filled the surroundings, condensing into a huge blade completely condensed from origin energy and the power of laws. It whistled towards Jinshin's head. Clearly, the person who had attacked him secretly did not want to wait any longer. He was afraid that the situation would change if he waited any longer. As he watched the blade rapidly approach him and sensed the might of a primordial realm expert within it, Jinshin's faked panic vanished. He became composed and calm. His gaze was cold and sharp like a sword. In the next moment, a sharp and powerful sword chi radiated from Jinshin's body. It shone brightly, as dazzling as the sun. At that moment, he seemed to have become a completely different person. His presence surged into the clouds as his battle intent became extremely shocking. Jinshin threw a punch at the sky. Chaotic force condensed on his fist as it collided with the incoming blade with the power of the laws of the sword. With a great boom, the entire miniature world shook gently. The blade had been shattered by Jinshin's punch, turning into a violent storm of energy that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Jinshin, on the other hand, was like an undefeatable god of war. His presence surged as he endured the devastating storm of energy. He shot into the sky in a single moment and glanced towards a certain direction. His gaze was extremely frightening, as if there was a flash of light in it. The sudden change stunned the hidden primordial realm expert. Young Master Changyang, who was originally on the brink of death, had suddenly become lively and displayed supreme battle prowess. He found this unbelievable. Ignoring the shock of the hidden primordial realm expert, Jinshin hovered in the air. The power of the laws of the sword gathered as the chaotic force within him surged. A powerful, gray-white sword chi immediately condensed in his right hand, and he suddenly swung it at the space before him. Jinshin did not hold back at all when he struck out this time. He completely unleashed the battle prowess of the 13th layer of the chaotic body, so his strike really did possess enough power to split apart the world. It had completely surpassed the level of the Divine King and reached the level of the primordial realm. With a deafening boom, the miniature world pulsed even more violently. The primordial realm expert who had always been hidden was forcefully forced out of space by Jinshin's attack, revealing his true form.